Welcome to Nocturnal Tales. Tonight we draw the curtains on one of our own original mysteries, a case set down as ever by the steady hand of a faithful companion. It is called the dinner party murder, and because it is a long and intricate affair, we present it in two parts. This is part one. Before we begin, a quick note. Some of you may recognize the bones of this story. An earlier version appeared on the channel some time ago, but we were never quite satisfied with it. We have since rewritten it from the ground up. New scenes, new dialogue, sharper twists, and a fuller telling that the story always deserved. Think of this as the definitive edition. The scene is London, March of 1937, on a night when the rain falls like old pewter and only the wealthy, the desperate, and detectives are abroad. An engraved card has summoned a celebrated detective to Harrow Hall in Mayfair, the marble palace of Sir Reginald Harrow, a man who made his fortune in the city and spent it with remarkable speed on old masters, Italian cabinets, silver, and social consequence. He is not loved, but he is invited everywhere, and in England that is often considered a fair substitute. A matter of some delicacy, the card says, requires attention. Say nothing to the other guests. By the time the soup is served, that delicacy will have a name. For the evening at Harrow Hall will not end as it began, and before the night is out, the doors will be closed, the storm will seal the house, and every elegant person in that glittering dining room will have reason to fear the questions that follow. As always, this tale is inspired by the spirit of the great Golden Age crime writers, but the plot, characters, and text you're about to hear are entirely our own creation. This episode is brought to you by the listeners who support Nocturnal Tales on Patreon, where tiers start at just $2.99 a month, and by those who help with one-off tips on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. If you'd like to support our work, you'll find all the links in the description. And a quick note, our ebook, Nocturnal Tales, The Collected Mysteries, Volume 2, is available now for $3.99. 8 earlier mysteries, rewritten and expanded for the page, with original Art Deco illustrations throughout. You can find it on Patreon, Gumroad, and Buy Me a Coffee. Links in the description. Now settle in. Pour something warm, dim the lights, and let the rain do the rest, as our detective steps across a marble hall hung with the dead and into a dinner party where the candlelight flatters everyone and the truth spares no one. Chapter 1. An invitation to Harrow Hall. There are invitations one accepts from duty, some from friendship, and some, as Poirot once observed to me, from the irresistible pull of danger. The invitation to Harrow Hall belonged, I think, to the third category. It arrived at Whitehaven Mansions on a wet afternoon in March of 1937, when London had taken on that peculiarly dispiriting colour of old pewter. I had come in from my club, shaken the rain from my hat, and found Poirot standing by the mantelpiece with a card between his finger and thumb. He regarded it with the gravity another man might reserve for a diplomatic crisis. "Ah, Hastings," he said without turning, "you arrive at the moment dramatic." "Good heavens," I replied, "has someone been murdered?" "Not yet." There was something in the way he said it that made me put down my umbrella. The card was thick, cream-coloured, and engraved in the old-fashioned manner. "Sir Reginald Harrow requests the pleasure of Monsieur Hercule Poirot's company at dinner. Harrow Hall, Mayfair. 8 o'clock. Beneath the formal wording, in a hand both bold and impatient, had been added, "A matter of some delicacy requires your attention. Say nothing of this to the other guests." I whistled softly. Harrow? The collector? The same. Even I knew the name. Sir Reginald Harrow was one of those men whose fortune had been made in the city and then converted with remarkable speed into old masters, Italian cabinets, silver, marble, and social consequence. He was not loved, but he was invited everywhere, and in England that is often considered a fair substitute. "What sort of delicacy?" I asked. Poirot placed the card upon the mantel with mathematical precision. "That, my friend, he does not say, which is either discretion or melodrama." "And you think it may be serious?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I think, Hastings, that a man like Sir Reginald does not summon Hercule Poirot to admire the soup." By 7:30 we were driving through Mayfair in a cab whose windows had turned opaque with rain. The streets shone black beneath the lamps, and the bare branches of the plane trees thrashed in the wind like thin, accusing fingers. London seemed emptied of all sensible citizens. Only the wealthy, the desperate, and detectives were abroad. Harrow Hall stood at the corner of a quiet square, a vast stone mansion with columns, iron balconies, and windows blazing gold against the storm. It looked less like a private residence than a bank that had decided to become aristocratic. The door was opened before we had mounted the final step. The butler who received us was a tall, severe man with the expression of one who had never spilled a drop of soup in his life. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Sir Reginald is expecting you." We were led through a marble hall hung with paintings. I am no expert on art, though I know what I like, and I confess I was impressed. Everywhere one turned there were gilt frames, dark varnished faces, solemn saints, mythological ladies insufficiently dressed for the English climate, and landscapes gloomy enough to encourage suicide. Poirot, however, was not admiring the masterpieces. His eyes had fixed upon a small portrait half hidden between two larger canvases. It showed a young woman in white, pale and unsmiling, her hands folded in her lap. "Who is that?" I murmured. The butler paused. "Lady Clara Harrow, sir. The late Lady Harrow." There was a faint tightening about his mouth when he said it. Poirot noticed it. Poirot noticed everything. "A beautiful face," he said. "Yes, sir." "And a sad one." The butler made no reply, but opened the double doors at the far end of the hall. The drawing-room was already occupied. Sir Reginald Harrow stood by the fireplace, a tall, silver-haired man of nearly 60, broad-shouldered and handsome in a hard, cold way. His evening dress was immaculate, his posture military, his eyes those of an auctioneer appraising men and women as though they too might be sold under the hammer. "My dear Poirot," he cried, advancing upon us with a smile that displayed perfect teeth and no warmth whatever. "You came. Excellent." "You requested it, Sir Reginald?" Yes, I did." His glance flicked briefly towards the others in the room. "We shall talk later. Privately." That last word was spoken quietly, but not quietly enough. I saw 3 heads turn. Sir Reginald clapped his hands together. "But first, introductions. You know Captain Hastings, I presume?" Several people bowed in my direction with varying degrees of interest. The first was a thin, nervous-looking man with sandy hair retreating from his forehead and a pair of spectacles he seemed forever pushing back into place. "Archibald Finch," said Sir Reginald, "a fellow collector, though one should use the word fellow generously." Mr. Finch gave a strained little laugh. "Sir Reginald enjoys his jokes." "I enjoy accuracy," said our host. The atmosphere chilled perceptibly. Next came a woman of about 30, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, and very much at ease. She wore a green evening gown and carried herself with the confidence of one who has entered many rooms where she was not entirely wanted. "Miss Evelyn Blake," said Sir Reginald, "a journalist. She has been writing some nonsense about stolen art and international dealers." "Not nonsense if it proves true," said Miss Blake pleasantly. Sir Reginald's smile thinned. "Truth, my dear Miss Blake, is a word journalists use when they have insufficient evidence for libel." She only smiled back. I liked her at once. Near the window stood a younger man, dark-haired and handsome, though dissipated about the eyes. He had the uneasy elegance of a man born to comfort and currently at war with his tailor, his creditors, and himself. "My son Charles," said Sir Reginald. Charles Harrow inclined his head. "Captain, Monsieur Poirot." His tone was polite, but he did not look at his father. "A pleasure, monsieur," said Poirot. Charles gave a short laugh. "Is it? We shall see." "Charles," said Sir Reginald sharply. The young man shrugged and reached for his drink. By the fireplace sat Lady Dorothy Sinclair, a woman of perhaps 50, still beautiful in a pale, fragile way. Her diamonds were excellent, her hands less so. They moved constantly, smoothing her gloves, touching her necklace, folding and unfolding a lace handkerchief. She greeted Poirot with grace, but I noticed that she avoided looking at the portrait above the mantel. It showed Sir Reginald in younger years, stern and triumphant, as though the painter had captured not a man, but a verdict. The final guest stood somewhat apart from the others. Victor Marlowe was a dark, spare man with a narrow face and heavy-lidded eyes. He possessed that particular stillness one sometimes sees in gamblers and professional soldiers. He shook Poirot's hand briefly, then withdrew as if contact with other human beings was an inconvenience. "A business associate," said Sir Reginald. "Formally," Marlowe corrected. Sir Reginald's eyes flashed. "For the present, at least." There it was again, the little crack in the polished surface. One could feel it in the room. A drawing-room may contain chairs, paintings, lamps, and flowers, but it may also contain resentment, fear, greed, humiliation, and old injury. Harrow Hall contained all these in abundance. Poirot stood very still, his head slightly to one side. I knew that attitude well. The machinery had begun to turn. Dinner was announced at 8:05. We went in according to Sir Reginald's arrangement. The dining-room was magnificent, too magnificent perhaps. A long mahogany table gleamed beneath candles and silver. Crimson orchids rose from the centre like a row of exotic wounds. The china bore the Harrow crest, so did the silver, so I suspected would the napkins have done had one examined them closely enough. Sir Reginald took the head of the table. Poirot was placed on his right. Charles sat on his left after some last-minute alteration made by his father with a brusque gesture. "No, no," said Sir Reginald as Lady Dorothy moved towards that chair. "Charles beside me tonight. Family first, eh?" Charles gave him a quick, suspicious look. Lady Dorothy went very pale, then recovered herself and moved to the lower end of the table beside Marlowe. It was nothing, perhaps. A minor rearrangement. A host's whim. But I saw Poirot's eyes rest for one instant on the empty chair, then on Sir Reginald's face. The soup was served. Conversation began badly and improved only in the sense that a duel improves once the first shot has missed. Sir Reginald dominated the table. He spoke of art as though he had invented it, of money as though he alone understood it, and of human nature with the contempt of a man who has profited from it. Finch contradicted him twice and retreated both times. Miss Blake asked one or two pointed questions about a Caravaggio recently acquired under doubtful circumstances. Marlowe said little. Lady Dorothy seemed to listen for something beyond the room. Charles drank too quickly. Outside the storm gathered force. Rain struck the windows in hard silver lines. Somewhere in the house a door banged, and one of the maids started violently. At length Sir Reginald lifted his glass. "My friends," he said. It was an odd choice of words. No one at that table looked much like a friend. To rare art, good wine, and the pleasures of possession. The toast was drunk. Poirot barely touched his glass. Sir Reginald looked round the table with satisfaction. Yet, for all his arrogance, I thought I detected beneath it something else, unease, perhaps even fear. His gaze moved more than once to the clock on the mantel. Once I saw his fingers touch the breast pocket of his dinner jacket, as though assuring himself that something was still there. Then the dessert was brought in. Chocolate mousse, served in delicate porcelain dishes, dark and glossy beneath a shaving of candied orange. A footman, young and pale, set Sir Reginald's dish before him with trembling hands. There was a slight mishap. A spoon slipped. It struck the floor with a bright metallic note. Sir Reginald turned on the boy. "Clumsy fool." The footman flushed scarlet, stooped, recovered the spoon, and murmured an apology. Another spoon was supplied. The service continued. I remember this clearly because Poirot had gone suddenly very quiet. Sir Reginald lifted his spoon. At that moment the clock began to strike 9. 1. He tasted the mousse. 2. His expression changed. 3. The spoon fell from his hand. 4. He clutched at his throat. 5. His chair scraped backwards with a terrible sound. 6. Charles cried, "Father?" 7. Lady Dorothy screamed. 8. Sir Reginald Harrow pitched forward, his face striking the table between the candles and the crimson orchids. 9. The clock fell silent. For a moment no one moved. The storm roared beyond the glass. The candles flickered. A dark stain spread slowly across the white cloth where the wine had overturned. Poirot rose. There was no haste in him, no panic, no theatrical alarm. He went to Sir Reginald, touched the wrist, then the side of the neck. His face had become grave. When he straightened, every eye in the room was fixed upon him. "Mesdames, messieurs," he said quietly, "Sir Reginald Harrow is dead." No one spoke. Poirot's gaze moved round the table, to Charles, white and shaking, to Finch, frozen behind his spectacles, to Miss Blake, whose hand had closed around her napkin, to Lady Dorothy, trembling violently, to Victor Marlowe, still as carved stone, and to the young footman who looked as though he might faint. Then Poirot looked down at the gleaming silver, the broken order of the table, the dessert dish, the fallen spoon. His voice, when he spoke again, was soft. "And unless I am very much mistaken, someone in this room has murdered him." Chapter 2. A toast turns bitter. I have never understood people who scream at moments of crisis. This is not meant unkindly. I am sure I have made noises of my own on certain occasions, particularly when bullets have been involved. Still, there is something singularly useless about a scream in the presence of death. It adds nothing to the facts. It clouds the mind. It gives the guilty, if the guilty are present, a few precious seconds in which to compose themselves. Lady Dorothy Sinclair's scream had scarcely died before the room descended into the sort of chaos that might have satisfied a lesser dramatist. Charles Harrow pushed back his chair so violently that it toppled against the rug. "Father, father!" He made as if to seize Sir Reginald by the shoulders, but Poirot caught his arm. "No, monsieur, do not touch him." Charles stared at him. His face had gone white beneath its flush of wine. "Damn you, man, he's my father." "And therefore," said Poirot very gently, "you will wish his murderer to be found." That checked him. At the far end of the table, Lady Dorothy had pressed both hands to her mouth. Her diamonds shook against her throat like drops of ice. Miss Evelyn Blake had risen halfway from her chair, one hand gripping the table edge. She looked horrified, certainly, but I noticed that her eyes, sharp, green, and professional, were already moving. The dish, the spoon, the footman, the faces. Archibald Finch sat frozen, his spectacles crooked, his napkin fallen into his lap. Victor Marlowe remained still. Too still, I thought. He had not started, had not exclaimed, had not even leaned forward. His eyes rested on the dead man with an expression I could not read. Poirot turned to the butler, who stood rigid by the door. "Your name?" "Ellis, sir." "Ellis, you will telephone the police at once. You will also see that no one leaves the house. No servant, no guest, no one. Is that clear?" "Perfectly, sir." "And the doctor?" "Dr. Meade lives 2 streets away. I shall send for him." "Bien, quickly." Ellis withdrew, recovering his dignity as only a first-rate butler can, and the footman who had served the fatal dish gave a small choking sound. Poirot's eyes settled on him. "You are?" "James, sir. You served Sir Reginald's dessert?" "Yes, sir." "From where?" "From the pantry, sir. Cook plated them. I brought them in with Thomas." He nodded towards another footman standing pale and forgotten against the wall. Poirot bent once more over Sir Reginald. He did not disturb the body more than necessary, but he examined the face, the lips, the fingers, and then the dessert dish. At last he lowered his head slightly and inhaled. His expression changed by no more than a fraction. "What is it?" I asked. He looked up. "An odour, Hastings, very faint." "Poison?" "Perhaps." Miss Blake spoke from across the table. "Cyanide?" Every head turned towards her. She coloured but did not retreat. "I have covered inquests, Monsieur Poirot. Bitter almonds, isn't it? That is what one reads." "One reads many things, mademoiselle," said Poirot. "Some of them are even true." She sat back, but I could see the journalist in her had not been extinguished by the horror. Quite the reverse. It had sharpened. Charles rounded on the footman. "You! What did you give him?" James recoiled. "Nothing, sir, only the mousse, same as the others." "You dropped the spoon." "I did, sir, but—" "But what?" Poirot's voice cut through the exchange. "Monsieur Charles, control yourself." Charles turned on him, breathing hard. "You expect me to sit here while that fool poisons my father?" "I expect you to remember that foolishness and murder are not the same thing." The rebuke struck home. Charles looked away, his jaw working. Poirot addressed the room. "No one is to touch anything upon this table. Not a glass, not a plate, not a spoon. You will all remain here until the police arrive." Mr. Finch found his voice at last. "Must we? Really, Monsieur Poirot, this is monstrous. Some of us are not accustomed to being treated like criminals." "Then tonight, monsieur, you will acquire a new experience." Finch's mouth opened, then shut. It would be false to say that I did not feel the horror of the moment. Sir Reginald had been a hard, unpleasant man, but to see him struck down in the middle of his own table, amid his silver and orchids and guests, was ghastly. Yet beneath the horror I felt another sensation, that old quickening that came whenever Poirot's mind began to move. For murder, however wicked, has its shape. It is not chaos, though it appears so at first. It has a beginning, a method, and an end. The difficulty is that the murderer knows the shape before anyone else does. Poirot began where he always began, with order. He placed each person precisely as they had been at the moment of Sir Reginald's collapse. I sketched the arrangement at his request on the back of a menu card. Sir Reginald at the head, Poirot on his right, Charles on his left. Opposite them, Archibald Finch and Miss Blake. At the lower end, Lady Dorothy and Victor Marlowe. The servants had entered through the green baize door near the sideboard. The desserts had been brought in 2 at a time. Sir Reginald's had been served first by James. "And the spoon?" Poirot asked. James swallowed. "I dropped one, sir. As I came round Mr. Finch's chair, it slipped off the tray. I picked it up at once and put it aside." "Where?" "On the sideboard, sir." "You did not give it to Sir Reginald?" "No, sir. I took a clean one." "From where?" "The sideboard drawer had been laid ready, sir. Extra dessert spoons." Poirot looked towards the sideboard. It was an enormous carved piece of furniture, dark and glossy, with silver arranged upon it in ranks. I saw nothing remarkable there, but then I have often seen nothing remarkable immediately, before Poirot saw everything. "And when you set down Sir Reginald's dish," Poirot continued, "did you observe anything?" The footman hesitated. "Speak," said Poirot. "There was a mark, sir." "A mark?" "On the rim of the dish, or just inside it. I thought maybe my thumb had touched the chocolate, but I had the dish by the saucer. I was going to wipe it, but Sir Reginald snapped at me." "What did he say?" James's blush deepened with remembered humiliation. "He said, 'Leave it alone, you clumsy young ass!' So I left it." A small sound came from Lady Dorothy. It might have been a sob. It might have been a gasp. Poirot turned quickly. "Madame?" "Nothing, only he was always cruel to servants." There was feeling in her voice. Sir Reginald, it appeared, had inspired many emotions. Affection was not yet among them. The doctor arrived before the police, a small elderly man who had evidently been dragged from his dinner and was not best pleased until he saw the body. Then professional habit took over. His examination was brief. "Well?" asked Charles hoarsely. Dr. Mead removed his spectacles. "I can pronounce life extinct. As for cause, I would prefer not to say definitively until the proper examination has been made." "But poison?" asked Miss Blake. The doctor looked at her with dislike. "It is possible." "Cyanide?" she pressed. "Possible," he repeated more coldly. Poirot said nothing. He was studying the table. The police arrived soon afterwards in the person of Inspector Barnes, a square, red-faced man with rain on his coat and intelligence in his eyes. He knew Poirot, of course, and greeted him with the weary resignation of a policeman who finds a brilliant amateur already in possession of the battlefield. "Monsieur Poirot, I might have known." "Inspector Barnes, you arrive at a house of art, wealth, and death. It is almost too English, n'est-ce pas?" Barnes grunted. "I'll take the death, you can keep the art." He heard the facts, gave his orders, stationed a constable at the door, and had the servants separated below stairs. The guests were moved one by one to the drawing-room under supervision, while the dining-room was preserved. Poirot remained behind with Barnes and myself. Now that the others had gone, the room seemed larger and colder. Sir Reginald's body had not yet been removed. His face, mercifully turned partly away, rested near the dark smear of ruined mousse. The candles burned lower. The orchids drooped in the heat. Barnes stood with his hands on his hips. "Poison in the pudding?" "Mousse, Inspector," said Poirot. "Same difference." "To the stomach, perhaps, not to the mind." Barnes shot him a look. "Meaning?" Poirot pointed not to the dish, but to the silver. "Observe. Sir Reginald's spoon lies there where it fell from his hand. A second spoon lies near the sideboard. The footman says he dropped one and replaced it. But I ask myself, replaced it with what?" Barnes frowned. "A clean spoon." "Assuredly, but clean in appearance only." He took a handkerchief from his pocket and, with delicate care, lifted a spoon from beneath the edge of a folded napkin on the sideboard. Its bowl appeared ordinary enough. Yet Poirot held it angled to the light. "Do you see, Hastings?" I peered at it. "A stain?" "A faint one, brownish, sticky at the edge." "Chocolate?" "Perhaps." Barnes leaned closer. "Or poison?" "Cyanide itself would not leave such a convenient calling card," said Poirot. "But something was applied, something mixed perhaps with chocolate or syrup to disguise its presence on the spoon." Barnes gave a low whistle. "So the dessert itself may not have been poisoned at all." "Precisely. If all ate the mousse and only Sir Reginald died, then either his dish alone was tampered with, or his spoon was. The smudge described by James may suggest the dish. The dropped spoon suggests the spoon. One of these facts is truth. The other may have been arranged to mislead us." I looked at the table, trying to reconstruct the moment. The footman, the dropped spoon, the host's anger, Charles beside him, Finch opposite, Miss Blake watching, Lady Dorothy displaced, Marlowe silent at the end. "Could the footman have done it?" I asked. "He could have," said Barnes. "He could," agreed Poirot. "But I do not yet say he did." Barnes snorted. "You never say anything until the last 10 minutes. "It is a habit which has brought me some success." The inspector turned back to the body. "Who benefits?" "Ah," said Poirot softly. "There we begin to leave the spoon and approach the soul." He moved slowly around the table, stopping behind each chair in turn. Mr. Finch, the rival collector, humiliated by Sir Reginald. Miss Blake, the journalist, perhaps threatened by what she knew. Lady Dorothy, nervous, displaced at the last moment from the chair beside him. Mr. Marlowe, business associate, cold as the marble in the hall, and Charles, the son with debts, anger, and proximity. "You like the son?" asked Barnes. "I like no one, Inspector. It is a murder investigation, not a dinner club." I could not help smiling. Poirot paused at Sir Reginald's place. His eyes rested on the dead man's breast pocket. "Inspector, permit me." Barnes nodded. With care, Poirot removed a folded paper from the pocket. It was sealed, but not addressed. The flap had been tucked in rather than gummed. Barnes opened it. Inside was a single sheet in Sir Reginald's bold hand. He read aloud. "Tonight after dinner I shall make an announcement. One of you has presumed too far upon my silence. That silence ends before midnight." Barnes looked up. Well, well. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. Poirot's eyes shone. "You perceive, Hastings? The dinner was not merely social. It was a stage. And Sir Reginald intended to expose someone. So it would appear? Then any of them might have killed him." "Exactly, mon ami." At that moment, from somewhere beyond the dining room, there came the sound of a door closing sharply. Not slammed, closed, deliberately. Barnes swung round. What was that? The constable at the hall door called out, "Who's there?" There was no answer. Poirot was already moving. For a small man, he could be astonishingly quick when he chose. We crossed the hall and reached the corridor leading towards the conservatory, just in time to see a figure vanish around the turn. A dark figure. A man, I thought, though I could not swear to it. Barnes swore and sent the constable after him. But by the time we reached the conservatory, only rain-lashed glass and wet flagstones greeted us. One of the outer doors stood ajar, letting in the cold night air. "No one could have gone far in this storm," Barnes growled. Poirot bent near the threshold. On the pale stone, just inside the door, lay a smear of mud and a single dark thread caught on the splintered edge of the wood. He lifted it carefully. "Black wool," I said. "Yes." "From a coat? Or a glove? Or a sleeve? We shall not yet marry ourselves to one possibility." Barnes looked back towards the drawing-room. "Someone tried to get out." "Or," said Poirot, "someone wished us to believe so." The inspector stared at him. Poirot smiled faintly. "In this house, Inspector, the truth does not walk plainly through the front door. It creeps, it doubles back, it hides behind good manners." He slipped the thread into an envelope Barnes provided. Then he turned towards the drawing-room, where the suspects waited beneath the painted gaze of the dead man. "Come, Hastings, we must ask our questions. Sir Reginald promised an announcement before midnight. It is now a little after 10. "And before midnight?" Poirot's expression hardened. "Before midnight, mon ami, we must discover which secret was worth killing for." Chapter 3. The First Crack in the Silver. Inspector Barnes had the drawing-room arranged like a courtroom, though without any of the dignity of one. The suspects sat separately, as if distance might make innocence more visible. Charles Harrow stood by the fireplace, one arm along the mantel, his face turned from the others. Archibald Finch occupied a chair too large for him, and looked as though he were being slowly swallowed by it. Miss Evelyn Blake had taken the small writing table near the window, and was making no attempt to hide the fact that she wished to take notes. Lady Dorothy sat very upright upon the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Victor Marlowe remained apart, half in shadow, with the air of a man who had expected the evening to become unpleasant, and was merely waiting to learn how expensive the unpleasantness would be. The storm had not lessened. Rain struck the windows in gusts, and the great house seemed to answer with little creaks and sighs of its own. Sir Reginald Harrow's portrait hung above the fireplace. It was impossible not to feel that he still dominated the room. Barnes stood before the assembly, square and official. "No one leaves this house tonight. You will each be questioned. You will answer plainly. If any of you thinks rank, money, or manners will prevent the truth coming out, you are mistaken." Mr. Finch gave a small, wounded sound. "Really, Inspector, especially manners," said Barnes. Poirot, who had been examining a porcelain shepherdess on a side table, turned with a faint smile. "Inspector, you are severe." "I've got a dead millionaire in the dining room, Monsieur Poirot. Severity seems appropriate." "Assuredly, but let us add to severity a little method." Barnes gave him a grudging nod. The two men understood one another. Barnes would command. Poirot would observe. It was an arrangement that had served justice well before, though it did little for the inspector's temper. Poirot's eyes passed over the company. "Monsieur Charles, perhaps we begin with you?" Charles turned sharply. "With me? You were seated beside your father. You were the nearest to him." "That hardly makes me a murderer." "No, it makes you the nearest." Charles gave a harsh laugh. "Very well. Ask whatever you like." "In the library, I think," said Poirot. Charles looked as though he might refuse, then thought better of it. He strode towards the door with the angry energy of a man who fears that if he stops moving, he may collapse. I followed with Poirot and Barnes. The library lay across the hall, a sombre room lined from floor to ceiling with books whose bindings appeared never to have been troubled by human hands. A fire burned low in the grate. On the desk lay correspondence, account books, and a silver-framed photograph of the late Lady Clara Harrow, the same sad young woman whose portrait we had seen in the hall. Charles saw me looking at it. "My mother," he said. There was a different note in his voice now, softer, wounded. Poirot sat. He indicated a chair, but Charles remained standing. "As you wish," said Poirot. "Your father's death has shocked you deeply." Charles stared. "Do you imagine I am acting?" "I imagine nothing, I ask." The young man's mouth tightened. "Yes, it has shocked me." "And grieved you?" "For God's sake. Grief and shock are not always the same thing, monsieur." Charles turned away, then back again. "My father was a difficult man, everyone knows it. He was arrogant, cruel when it suited him, and he liked to keep people dependent, but he was still my father." "You quarrelled? Often? About money?" Charles hesitated just long enough. "Yes." Barnes made a note. Charles saw it and flushed. "I had debts, I won't deny it, cards, horses, some bad investments. I asked him for help and he refused it." "Tonight?" "No, last week." "And what did he say?" Charles looked towards the fire. "He said he had carried me long enough. He said there would be changes to his will if I did not make myself useful." "Disinheritance?" asked Barnes. "He threatened it often." But this time, Charles's face changed. This time I believed him. There it was, the first crack in the silver. Poirot leaned back. "Sir Reginald invited you tonight despite this quarrel." "He summoned me. That was the word in his note. He did not invite people. He summoned them." "And did you know he intended to make an announcement after dinner?" Charles looked up sharply. "No." "You are sure?" "Quite sure." Poirot studied him. "Your father altered the seating at the last moment. He placed you beside him and moved Lady Dorothy." "Yes." "Did you know he would do that?" "No, I was as surprised as anyone." "Yet he said family first." Charles gave a bitter smile. That was father's humour. He liked phrases that sounded warm and meant nothing. "Did you touch his dessert spoon?" "No." "His dish?" "No." "Did you move from your place during the dessert service?" "I leaned back when the footman dropped the spoon, that is all." "Did you bump him?" Charles stared. "Bump him?" "The footman, James." "No." "Did anyone?" "I don't know. It all happened quickly." Poirot said nothing for a moment. His silence was always more dangerous than another man's question. At last he said, What secret was your father going to reveal tonight? Charles's anger vanished. I don't know. But you suspect? No. Come, monsieur. Your father gathered under his roof a rival collector, a journalist, an old family friend, a business associate, and his son. He carried in his pocket a note declaring that his silence would end before midnight. This does not suggest a discussion of the weather. Charles passed a hand over his face. He had been strange all week, locked in here with his papers, sending telegrams, raging one moment and laughing the next. Yesterday I heard him talking to Ellis in the hall. He said, "They think I am blind. They shall learn what sight costs." Sight? Poirot murmured. He collected pictures, I said. Perhaps he meant... Poirot raised one hand. I stopped. I have learned painfully that Poirot does not enjoy my assistance when he is thinking. "Anything else?" asked Barnes. Charles hesitated. There was a letter. From whom? I don't know. It arrived this morning. He read it at breakfast and went quite white. White? Said Poirot softly. Yes, not angry, frightened. Where is this letter now? I don't know. Did you look for it? Charles's eyes flashed. No. Poirot rose. Thank you, monsieur. Do you believe me? Poirot looked at him for a moment. I believe that you hated your dependence upon your father. I believe that you feared losing his money. I believe also that grief, anger, and fear may sit at the same table in a man's heart. That is no answer. It is the only honest one. Charles gave a short, humorless laugh. Then God help me. When he had gone, Barnes shut the door. He had motive enough. Money is a very old motive, said Poirot. It has the advantage of being common. You don't like him for it? I do not yet like anything, except perhaps the word sight. Barnes frowned. The father's phrase? Yes. They shall learn what sight costs. A curious expression. Could mean the paintings. Could mean blackmail, I suggested. Poirot looked at me approvingly. Not impossible, Hastings. In this house, I think, several people have paid dearly to be seen, and perhaps more dearly to remain unseen. We returned to the drawing-room. Charles resumed his place near the fire, but did not look at the others. Lady Dorothy watched him with an expression of pity so intense that it seemed almost maternal. Poirot noticed that too. He bowed to her. Lady Dorothy, may we trouble you? She rose at once, but not steadily. I shall tell you whatever I can. I am sure of it, madam. We did not take her to the library. Poirot chose the small morning room instead, a pale, elegant chamber with yellow silk walls and a cabinet of porcelain birds. It had been designed for daylight and cheerfulness, and therefore looked particularly melancholy at night. Lady Dorothy sat with her back very straight. You were a close friend of the family, Poirot began. Of Clara's, she said. Lady Harrow, we were girls together. And of Sir Reginald? Her hands tightened. After Clara died, I tried to remain a friend to the household, for Charles's sake as much as anything. You cared for him? He was a lonely boy. And now? She looked down. He is still lonely. There was more there, I thought, than a general kindness. Not romantic affection. She was old enough to be his mother, but a deep and anxious loyalty. Poirot changed direction. Tonight Sir Reginald moved you from the chair beside him. Yes. Had you expected to sit there? I had been placed there. I saw the card. And when he changed it? I was surprised. Disturbed? She looked at him. Would you not be, Monsieur Poirot? Sir Reginald rarely changed anything without a reason. And what reason did you imagine? I thought he wished to humiliate me. In what way? Her face coloured faintly. It is not pleasant to be moved like a servant before others, especially by a man who knows one cannot protest. Her eyes met his. and for the first time some warmth came into them. "You understand a great deal?" "It is my profession." She looked away. "Sir Reginald enjoyed small cruelties. They cost him nothing. And yet you came to his dinner." "I had no choice." Barnes shifted. "No choice?" Lady Dorothy pressed her lips together. Poirot's voice softened. "Madam, a murder has been committed. The dead man's secrets will not remain polite." She closed her eyes briefly. "Sir Reginald was trustee of a portion of Clara's estate. There were questions, irregularities. I had asked my solicitor to examine them." "Money missing?" asked Barnes. "Not missing. Delayed, obstructed. Sir Reginald believed everything connected with Clara belonged to him by right, including what she had wished set aside for others." "For Charles?" asked Poirot. "For Charles, and for a small charitable trust." "Did you confront him?" "Yes, last month. He laughed at me." "And tonight?" "He told me when I arrived that I should be careful stirring old ashes. He said sometimes one finds bones." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Bones?" "His word." "And you were watching the clock during dinner?" She started. "Was I?" "Yes." Her poise faltered. "I was expecting a telephone call from my solicitor. He had promised to send word if certain documents were found." "What documents?" "I don't know precisely. Clara's papers. A codicil, perhaps." Barnes made another note. Poirot leaned forward. "Lady Dorothy, did you know Sir Reginald intended to make an announcement before midnight?" Her lips parted. "No." "You are certain?" "Quite." "You did not poison him to prevent him exposing your inquiry into the estate?" Her face went white. "No." "Nor to avenge Lady Clara?" "No." The answer came too quickly, too passionately. Poirot did not miss it. "Ah, then there was something to avenge?" Lady Dorothy turned away, and when she spoke her voice was almost a whisper. "Clara was unhappy, that is all." "With Sir Reginald?" "She was married to him." It was a simple answer, and a devastating one. For a moment no one spoke. Then Lady Dorothy gathered herself. "I did not kill him, Monsieur Poirot, but if you ask whether I mourn him, I will not insult you by pretending." "Merci, madame. Truth, even partial, is refreshing." She rose, but at the door she paused. "There is one thing." Poirot looked up. "Yes?" "When the dessert was served, Mr. Finch was watching the sideboard." "Not Sir Reginald?" "No, the sideboard." And he looked terrified. After she had gone, Barnes exhaled. "Well, she hated him too." "This evening becomes crowded with hatred," said Poirot, "and Finch watching the sideboard fits your spoon theory." "It fits something." We returned once more to the drawing-room. Finch, seeing us approach, began polishing his spectacles with frantic energy. "Mr. Finch," said Barnes, "your turn." Finch rose, dropped his handkerchief, stooped to recover it, nearly lost his spectacles, and altogether gave the impression of a man who would confess to anything if only the furniture would stop threatening him. As we crossed the hall, Poirot slowed. At the foot of the great staircase, half hidden beneath the edge of a runner, something white protruded. He bent and picked it up. It was a torn corner of paper, damp at one edge, as though it had been clutched in a wet hand. Only 3 words remained legible. "Before midnight or—" Poirot held it to the light. Barnes swore softly. "Part of the letter?" "Perhaps. The one that frightened Sir Reginald?" "Perhaps." Looked towards the drawing-room door, behind which the suspects waited with their fear, their lies, and their excellent manners. Poirot folded the scrap carefully. "Before midnight," he murmured. "Always midnight." The clock in the hall chimed the half-hour. 10:30. Poirot's face was very grave. "Come, Hastings, We have 90 minutes left before the dead man's appointment with the truth. Chapter 4. Mr. Finch loses his nerve. Archibald Finch was one of those unfortunate men who appear guilty even when ordering luncheon. He entered the library ahead of us with a series of small, uncertain movements. A glance to the left, a twitch to the right, a hand to his spectacles, then to his cuff, then back again to his spectacles. Had Inspector Barnes been a hound, he would have bayed at once. Poirot, however, regarded him with no visible suspicion. That, in my experience, was far more alarming. "Please sit, Monsieur Finch." Finch sat, then rose again. "Would you prefer me standing?" "I prefer only that you are comfortable." "That is hardly possible under the circumstances." "Then sit uncomfortably." Finch obeyed. Barnes took up a position near the desk. I remained by the fire. Poirot stood before the collector like a small, exquisitely dressed priest about to hear a confession. "You were a rival of Sir Reginald's," he began. Finch gave a nervous laugh. "Rival is a strong word." "Enemy?" "That is stronger still." "But more accurate." Finch removed his spectacles and began polishing them. "Sir Reginald and I moved in the same circles. We attended the same sales. We desired on occasion the same works. That is all." Poirot looked at him mildly. "The Rembrandt?" The hand polishing the spectacles stopped. "I beg your pardon?" "The Rembrandt which Sir Reginald acquired last year, the one you believed already promised to you." Finch's thin face tightened. "That was a private matter." "In this house, monsieur, private matters have acquired a habit of ending in death." Finch put his spectacles back on, though not quite straight. "He behaved abominably. There, are you satisfied? He outbid me by arrangement. The dealer had given me his word. Sir Reginald heard of it, stepped in, and made the fellow an offer so vulgar no honest man could match it." "Sir Reginald was not an honest man?" asked Barnes. Finch looked frightened by his own implication. "I did not say that." "You danced near it." "I meant only that he had no scruples in collecting." Poirot nodded. "To some men, art is beauty, to others, possession. To Sir Reginald—" "Victory!" said Finch bitterly. The word seemed to escape him before he could prevent it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And you resented his victories?" "Yes, I resented them. That is not murder." "No, but resentment is a good servant to murder. It lays the table. Murder need only sit down." Finch shivered. "I did not kill him." "Then why were you watching the sideboard?" The question struck like a slap. Finch blinked. "I was not." "Lady Dorothy says you were." "Lady Dorothy is overwrought." "Miss Blake says you watched the footman." "Miss Blake watches everyone. It is a vulgar professional habit." "And I say," Poirot continued softly, "that when the spoon fell, you reacted not with surprise, but with fear." Finch had gone very pale. "I know nothing of the spoon." Poirot's voice sharpened. "Do you know something of the sideboard?" For a moment Finch said nothing. The rain lashed hard against the window. Somewhere in the house a door creaked, and the sound travelled through the silence like a finger drawn along glass. Then Finch leaned forward. "I want protection." Barnes gave a short laugh. "From whom?" Finch looked from him to Poirot. "From whoever killed Reginald Harrow." "That," said Poirot, "is very interesting. Why should the murderer trouble himself with you?" Finch swallowed. "Because I saw something." Barnes stepped away from the desk. "What?" Finch's hands trembled in his lap. "Before dinner, in the hall, Sir Reginald was speaking to someone near the servants' passage. I did not see the person clearly. Only a sleeve, dark cloth, a glove. Sir Reginald was angry, but quietly angry, which with him was worse." "What did he say?" asked Poirot. Finch shut his eyes, trying to remember. "He said, You shall have nothing more from me, not a penny, not a favour, not silence. Poirot exchanged a glance with Barnes. And the other person? A whisper, I could not make out the words. Man or woman? I don't know. Come, monsieur. I truly don't know. The voice was low. It might have been either. Then what frightened you at dinner? Finch bent his head. I saw the same glove. Poirot became very still. Where? Near the sideboard, just before dessert was served. Someone stood partly behind the footman Thomas as the dishes came through. I thought at first it was a servant. But the glove... What of the glove? It was not a servant's glove. Black kid. Fine quality. I noticed because... Because you notice such things, said Poirot. Yes. Whose hand? I could not see. The candles, the movement, the servants. It was only a moment. And then? Then James dropped the spoon. Barnes spoke sharply. Why didn't you say this before? Finch looked miserable. Because I had no wish to involve myself. You are already involved. A man died 6 feet from you. I know that now. Poirot held up a hand, silencing Barnes. Monsieur Finch, there is more. You did not merely fear the murderer. You feared Sir Reginald's announcement. Finch's mouth opened and closed. Shall I tell you why? Poirot asked. Because Sir Reginald had discovered something concerning your trip to Paris. Finch's fingers flew to his spectacles. My trip is irrelevant. No, you have said it too often, therefore it is relevant. Barnes moved closer. What's in Paris, Finch? The collector seemed suddenly smaller. A painting. What painting? Finch whispered the answer. The Caravaggio. I stared at him. Sir Reginald's Caravaggio? No? Finch drew a shaky breath. That is the point. The painting in Sir Reginald's gallery is not merely disputed. It is not his at all. Poirot's head tilted. Explain. Finch looked thoroughly wretched now, but some dam had broken inside him. The words came quickly. There was a private sale in Paris 2 years ago, a painting believed to be from the school of Caravaggio, poorly catalogued, badly restored, but important. Sir Reginald bought it through an agent. Some months later, a claim emerged from an Italian family. They alleged the work had been removed illegally during the war. Stolen? Asked Barnes. Possibly. Not by Sir Reginald. At least not directly. But he knew. He knew enough to hide the provenance. And you knew this? Said Poirot. I suspected. Miss Blake suspected more. I had intended to go to Paris tomorrow to examine correspondence from the dealer's estate. If it proved what I thought, Sir Reginald would have been ruined in our circle. That would please you. Finch's face twisted. Yes. I am not noble, Monsieur Poirot. I wanted him exposed. I wanted him laughed at. I wanted every man he had humiliated to see him caught with a stolen masterpiece on his wall. But you did not kill him? No. Poirot looked at him for a long moment. No, he said at last. I do not think you did. Barnes frowned. That's generous. It is logical. Monsieur Finch wished Sir Reginald alive long enough to be disgraced. Finch sagged with relief. But, Poirot continued, you have still concealed information in a murder inquiry. Do not do so again. The next secret may be your last. Finch nodded miserably. Poirot turned towards the door. We shall speak now with Miss Blake. Gladly, said Barnes. Perhaps the lady journalist has been writing more than notes. We found Evelyn Blake not in the drawing-room where she had been instructed to remain, but by the hall table, pretending to examine a Chinese vase while standing rather too near the library door. Barnes's expression darkened. Listening, Miss Blake? She turned with admirable composure. Inspector, in my profession one prefers the word observing. In mine we prefer obstruction. Poirot smiled. Mademoiselle Blake, since you are already so eager for information, perhaps you will provide some. She glanced towards Finch as he retreated past her. Something like contempt crossed her face. With pleasure. Poirot led her not to the library but to the conservatory. It was a strange choice, but I soon understood it. The conservatory was where the outer door had been found ajar, where the thread had caught, where someone had either fled or pretended to flee. Poirot wished to watch her reaction. She gave him very little. Rain still ran down the glass walls, turning the world outside into a blur of black branches and silver streaks. The plants, heavy-leaved and exotic, breathed out a damp, earthy heat. Somewhere water dripped steadily into a copper tray. Miss Blake stood beneath a palm and folded her arms. "Well, Monsieur Poirot, you investigated Sir Reginald. I investigated a stolen painting, which happened to hang in his house. Yes. Did he know?" "Of course he knew. He threatened me with solicitors, social ruin, and rather unimaginatively hell." "Tonight he intended to expose you?" She laughed. "Expose me for what? Doing my job?" Poirot did not answer at once. He took from his pocket the torn scrap we had found near the staircase. "Do you recognize this?" She looked at it. A flicker, small but real. "No, mademoiselle." I said no. "You are a journalist. You know ink, paper, type, handwriting. You have seen this before." She hesitated. "Perhaps." "Where?" She drew in a breath. "Sir Reginald showed me a letter when I arrived." Barnes snapped. "You might have mentioned that. And you might have asked." Barnes took a step forward, but Poirot's raised hand restrained him. "What did the letter say?" Poirot asked. "Not all of it. He only let me see a few lines. Enough to frighten me, I suppose." "Frighten you?" Her confidence faltered for the first time. "It referred to my brother." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Ah, now we approach the heart." Miss Blake looked away through the rain-streaked glass. "My brother Daniel worked for a London dealer. Clever, ambitious, weak. He got involved in transactions he did not understand. When the Caravaggio trail became dangerous, he was blamed for missing documents. He lost his position. 6 months later, he died." "Died?" I asked. "An accident," they said. "Too much drink, a fall by the river. They found a coat on the bank and a hat in the water. The body, when it was recovered downstream, was too badly damaged for certainty. But no one questioned the identification." "But you do not believe that?" "I believe powerful men often benefit from accidents." Her voice was level, but her hand had tightened around the strap of her evening bag. "And Sir Reginald?" asked Poirot. "He knew Daniel had been used. He knew who had hidden the papers. He may even have ordered it. I came tonight because he promised to tell me the name." "Why would he do that?" "Because I threatened publication." "And he feared scandal?" "No." Her mouth hardened. Sir Reginald did not fear scandal. He enjoyed surviving it. But the letter he received this morning frightened him. After that, he sent word that if I came tonight, I would have my answer before midnight." "Again midnight," murmured Poirot. Barnes held out his hand. "The letter." "I don't have it." "Did you take it?" "No." "Did you tear it?" "No." "Did you kill Sir Reginald before he could change his mind?" Miss Blake's eyes flashed. "If I wanted him dead, Inspector, I would have waited until after he spoke." It was a good answer. Too good, perhaps. Poirot said, "During dessert, what did you see?" "Finch panicking, Lady Dorothy watching the clock, Charles drinking too much, Marlowe watching Sir Reginald." "And the sideboard?" "I saw movement near it." "What kind of movement?" "A hand." "A gloved hand?" She turned quickly towards him. "So Finch told you?" "Answer, please." "Yes, a black glove, but nearly everyone wore dark gloves when they arrived." "Men and women?" "Yes." "Did you see whose?" "No." Poirot moved to the conservatory door. It still stood shut now, guarded from outside by a constable. You were found near the hall table just now. Earlier, someone passed this way and opened the outer door. Was it you? No. Yet you know this room. I came here before dinner. Why? Miss Blake hesitated. To meet someone. Barnes pounced. Who? I don't know. Convenient. She opened her evening bag and withdrew a folded note. I received this at my office this afternoon. Poirot took it. The message was brief, printed in block capitals. Come to Harrow Hall tonight. The Caravaggio is only the beginning. Conservatory, 7:45. No signature. At 7:45, she said. I came here. No one arrived. Then the butler announced dinner. Did you tell Sir Reginald? No. Why not? Because I was not sure he had not sent it himself. Poirot examined the note, then handed it to Barnes. Interesting. That word again, said Barnes sourly. Poirot turned to Miss Blake. One more question. You said the Caravaggio was only the beginning. Beginning of what? Her expression changed. Not fear exactly. Recognition. There were other transactions, other names. Sir Reginald, Marlowe, the dealer in Paris, perhaps Finch without knowing it. My brother had copied a ledger before he died. I never found it. A ledger, said Poirot. Yes. Not a painting, not a letter, a ledger. Miss Blake looked at him sharply. You know something. Not yet. I arranged the pieces, that is all. But I knew that tone. Poirot had found a corner of the pattern. As Miss Blake was escorted back to the drawing-room, Barnes turned the anonymous note over in his hands. Same paper as the torn scrap? Similar, said Poirot. Same writer? Perhaps not. The torn scrap was handwritten. This is printed a disguise. Barnes grunted. I dislike this house. It is a most unhealthy house, Poirot agreed. We crossed the conservatory towards the inner door. As Poirot passed a large fern, he stopped. What is it? I asked. He bent and parted the leaves. On the tiled floor, hidden behind the pot, lay a black kid glove. For a second none of us spoke. Barnes stooped, but Poirot stopped him. Careful, Inspector! The glove lay palm upward. Across the fingertips was a faint brownish smear, dry now, but still visible. Chocolate, I said. Perhaps. Barnes's face hardened. Or the mixture used on the spoon. Poirot's eyes were very bright. He lifted the glove with his handkerchief. It was small, finely made, and elegant. A woman's, I asked. Possibly. Lady Dorothy? Possibly. Miss Blake? Possibly, Barnes said. That narrows it magnificently. Poirot did not smile. No, Inspector, it widens it. A clever murderer may wear another person's glove. At that moment a constable appeared at the door. Inspector, there's trouble in the drawing-room. Barnes swore. What now? Mr. Marlowe, sir. He says one of his gloves is missing. Poirot looked down at the glove in his hand. Then he looked at me. Ah, Hastings, he said softly. Now the murderer begins to make mistakes, or else to make us admire his cleverness. And there, my friends, we must leave Harrow Hall for tonight. A man is dead at his own table. A spoon has been quietly exchanged. A glove has been found behind the ferns of the conservatory, a dark smear upon its fingertips. And now, in the drawing-room, a second glove has gone missing, and the little Belgian's eyes have begun to gleam. Every guest has an answer too smooth, an alibi too tidy, a silence too carefully kept. And Poirot, turning that single-stained glove in his hand, has told us only this, that the murderer has begun at last to make mistakes, or else to make us admire his cleverness. Which of the two it shall be we will discover in part 2. If this first half has its hooks in you, do let us know in the comments who you suspect, and why. The brooding son, the trembling secretary, the watchful man who would not flinch when his host fell dead. And if you'd like to support Nocturnal Tales and keep these full-length mysteries coming, the links for Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal are waiting in the description. Until part 2 then, be wary of the host who keeps secrets and never ever trust a toast you did not pour yourself. A quick reminder about where you can find our stories. Here on YouTube, we now publish 2 stories each week. But on Patreon, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, you can enjoy a new story every single day. We began publishing daily around 3 weeks ago, when we introduced the Midnight Archive, our collection of classic mysteries featuring Sherlock Holmes, Arsène Lupin, Lady Molly, and many others, alongside our original Nocturnal Tales mysteries. As of today, there are already 195 stories available across Patreon, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, with a new one added every day. So, if you would like more stories than we can publish here on YouTube, or if a particular episode is no longer available on the channel, you can still find it on Patreon, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Welcome back to Nocturnal Tales, and to the second and final part of our original mystery, the dinner party murder. If you are joining us here, let us bring you to the table. On a storm-locked night in Mayfair, Sir Reginald Harrow, collector, financier, and one of the least beloved men in London, gathered a handful of guests beneath his old masters and his cold silver. Before the evening was out, he lay dead among them, and the great house sealed against the rain, with every guest a prisoner of suspicion. Our detective has placed each of them precisely where they sat at the moment of the collapse. He has noted the exchanged spoon, the watchful guest who did not flinch, the secretary at his prayers, and he has found a glove behind the ferns, marked with a dark and telling smear. Tonight the threads are drawn tight. A missing glove becomes an accusation. A shadow falls across the portrait of the late Lady Clara Harrow, and a man thought long gone returns at last, through the servant's door, bringing with him a debt that has waited 17 years to be paid. This episode, like all our work, is made possible by the listeners who support Nocturnal Tales on Patreon, where tiers start at just $2.99 a month, and by those who send one-off tips on Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. You'll find every link in the description. So settle in once more. The storm has not lifted, the guests have not moved, and our detective is ready to explain precisely how a dinner became a death. Chapter 5. The Missing Glove. There are objects which become important only because someone has tried to make them so. A glove, for instance, is usually a dull thing. It protects the hand, matches the hat if one is properly dressed, and is otherwise forgotten. But a glove discovered behind a fern in a conservatory, bearing a dark smear upon its fingertips during an inquiry into murder by poison. That is no longer a glove. It is an accusation. The drawing-room had grown more strained in our absence. Charles Harrow stood near the window, staring out into the storm with the brooding air of a man watching his own future drown. Lady Dorothy sat rigidly upon the sofa. Finch had retreated into a corner and appeared to be praying, though whether to God or to the police I could not tell. Miss Blake, having been returned to the room, watched everything with sharp, hungry attention. Victor Marlowe stood by the fireplace, one hand extended. His right hand was bare. "My glove," he said coldly, "has been taken." Inspector Barnes shut the door behind us. "Taken?" "Yes, from my coat pocket. I placed both gloves there when we came in to dinner. Now one remains." "And you discovered this when?" "Just now." "Why were you looking?" Marlowe's eyelids lowered. "Because I dislike being detained in a house where a man has been murdered. It occurred to me that when I leave, I should prefer to do so fully dressed." "Thought you weren't leaving." "Eventually, Inspector, even Scotland Yard exhausts itself." Barnes's jaw set. Poirot, meanwhile, had said nothing. He crossed the room and placed the black glove upon a small table, still wrapped in his handkerchief. A little sound came from Lady Dorothy. Marlowe looked at the glove. "That is mine." "You are certain?" asked Poirot. "Quite." "Describe it, if you please." "Black kid, Paris, my initials inside the wrist." Poirot turned the glove over delicately. Inside, stamped in small gold letters, were the initials VM. Barnes grunted. "That settles ownership." "Ownership, yes," said Poirot. "Use, no." Marlowe's face did not alter, but the hand at his side closed once. "You imply someone used my glove?" "I imply nothing. I arrange possibilities." Miss Blake leaned forward. "And the smear?" Poirot glanced at her. "Mademoiselle, your impatience is not without charm, but it is still impatience." She sat back, though reluctantly. Barnes pointed at Marlowe. "You'd better come with us." Marlowe inclined his head as though accepting an invitation to an inferior club. "As you wish." Poirot did not take him to the library. Instead, he chose Sir Reginald's study, a darker, narrower room at the rear of the house, where the dead man's presence seemed stronger than anywhere else. It was a room of ledgers, locks, and secrets. There were deed boxes stacked beneath the windows, account books lined precisely upon the shelves, and a large desk positioned not for comfort but command. Above it hung no painting, only a clock. The time was 20 minutes to 11. Marlowe noticed our glance. "Yes," he said, "midnight approaches. I trust the house will not produce ghosts." "It has already produced one corpse," said Barnes. "That will do." Poirot seated himself behind the desk, a choice I thought rather bold. Marlowe remained standing. "Monsieur Marlowe, your business with Sir Reginald was not healthy." "What business is?" "Profitable business." A faint smile touched Marlowe's mouth. "Sir Reginald profited. That was generally enough for Sir Reginald." "And for you?" "I prefer balance." Poirot opened a ledger which lay on the desk. He did not pretend he had found it by accident. "There is here an entry, Marlowe, £10,000 pending, a large sum." "A temporary arrangement." "A debt? An investment?" Barnes gave a dry laugh. "That word has hidden more sins than confession ever cleared." Marlowe looked at him coolly. "Then arrest the dictionary." Poirot tapped the ledger. "Sir Reginald intended to end this arrangement?" Marlowe did not answer at once. He had become difficult. In what way? In the usual way of men who age badly: suspicion, greed, sudden fits of morality after a lifetime without it. Morality concerning the Caravaggio? Marlowe's eyes flickered. It was the smallest thing. Had I not been watching him, I should have missed it. Poirot did not miss it. "Ah," he said softly, "you know the painting." "I know of it." "Did you assist in its acquisition?" "I assisted Sir Reginald in many matters." "That is not an answer." "It is the only one I intend to give." Barnes stepped forward. "You may find your intentions changing." Marlowe turned his gaze on him. "Inspector, I have done business in 3 countries with men who settled disputes by methods less tedious than British questioning. You do not alarm me." "No," said Poirot. "But something did." For the first time, Marlowe's expression tightened. Poirot leaned back. "Sir Reginald received a letter this morning. He read it and was afraid. He invited several people to dinner. In his pocket was a note saying his silence would end before midnight. You, monsieur, were among those summoned. So were the others." "Yes, but your glove is found hidden in the conservatory with a smear upon it that may connect to the poisoned spoon." "I did not put it there." "Then who did?" "I imagine that is your profession, Monsieur Poirot." "Indeed, but let us assist it. When did you last see both gloves?" "When I removed them in the hall." "And placed them?" "In my coat pocket." "Where was the coat?" "With the others. In the cloakroom." "Accessible to whom?" to the servants, to any guest who cared to invent a reason. "Did you go to the cloakroom before dinner?" "No." "After dinner?" "No." "During the confusion after Sir Reginald died?" Marlowe paused. "No." "You are certain?" "Yes." Poirot's eyes rested on him. That pause was unfortunate. It was irritation. It was calculation. Marlowe said nothing. Poirot suddenly changed tone. "You watched Sir Reginald during dinner?" "Naturally, he was the host." "You watched his hands?" This time Marlowe's stillness became sharper. "He kept touching his breast pocket," said Poirot. "You saw this. You wondered what he carried there. A note, a letter, a proof." Marlowe's voice was low. "You are inventive." "No, merely attentive." Barnes opened the drawer of the desk. "Was it this you were after?" Inside lay a small leather-bound account book. The title page bore no name, only the year. Poirot reached for it before Barnes could remove it fully. Marlowe took one involuntary step forward. There it was, clear as daylight. Poirot smiled. "You recognize it?" "No." "Your feet, monsieur, contradict your mouth." Barnes lifted the book. "What is it?" "I suspect," said Poirot, "the beginning of many troubles." He opened it carefully. The entries were not in Sir Reginald's bold hand, but in a smaller, neater script. Names, dates, initials, sums, references to shipments, galleries, private sales, and codes I did not understand. Miss Blake had spoken of a ledger copied by her brother before his death. Here, perhaps, was the original, or something very like it. Marlowe's face had become expressionless. "Where did you find that?" he asked. "In Sir Reginald's desk," said Barnes. "It was not there earlier." Poirot looked up. "Earlier?" The silence that followed was most instructive. Barnes smiled without humour. "So you did come into this room?" Marlowe's eyes narrowed. "Before dinner?" "You said nothing." "I was not asked whether I had entered the study before dinner. I was asked about the cloakroom." Barnes looked ready to explode, but Poirot only nodded, almost approvingly. "Exactitude. It is a weapon, no? Why did you come here?" "To speak with Reginald privately." "About the ledger?" "Yes." "At last." Marlowe's voice hardened. "That book contains matters which could be misunderstood." "By the police?" asked Barnes. "By fools?" "Same thing, in your view?" Marlowe did not dignify that with a reply. Poirot turned a page. "Your name appears several times." "So does Sir Reginald's." "And others?" "Yes." "Including Daniel Blake?" Marlowe's gaze moved to Poirot. "Daniel Blake was a clerk who stole documents. Miss Blake believes he was used." "Miss Blake believes whatever makes a better article." "Did he die because of this book?" "I don't know." It was said too quickly and too flatly. Poirot closed the ledger. "Monsieur Marlowe, you had motive to silence Sir Reginald. If he exposed you, your business, your reputation, perhaps your liberty, would be endangered. Your glove is found hidden near the very door through which someone attempted to pass. You had knowledge of the ledger. You lied by omission. It is not a comfortable position." Marlowe's lips curved. "And yet you do not believe I killed him?" Barnes looked sharply at Poirot. Poirot said, "I believe you are dangerous, monsieur. That is not the same thing." For the first time, genuine amusement touched Marlowe's face. "You are wasted among policemen." "And you, perhaps, among gentlemen." That ended the interview. Marlowe was returned to the drawing-room under Barnes's eye, but Poirot lingered in the study. He stood behind Sir Reginald's desk, turning the ledger over in his hands. "What do you make of it?" I asked. "A book of sins, Hastings." "Marlowe's sins?" "Among others." "Then surely Marlowe killed him." Poirot sighed. You have the military mind, my friend. You see a target and wish to fire. Sometimes the target is the enemy. Yes, and sometimes it is a hat placed upon a stick to draw the bullet. I frowned. You think the glove was planted? I think it was meant to be found. By us? By someone. Barnes returned alone, having left Marlowe under guard. Well? Poirot placed the ledger on the desk. Marlowe lies, but not like a murderer who fears the noose. He lies like a man protecting money. Money hangs men too. Sometimes. But consider the glove. If Marlowe poisoned Sir Reginald using his own glove, why hide it in the conservatory? Why not burn it, throw it into the storm, cut it to pieces? He panicked. Marlowe does not panic, Barnes grunted. No, he makes other people panic. Poirot nodded. Just so. At that moment the door opened and Ellis the butler appeared. His face, normally expressionless, showed strain. Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, cook has found something in the kitchen dustbin. Barnes straightened. What? A small bottle, sir. She says it was not there before dinner. We followed him at once. The kitchen was in a state of suppressed terror. Servants stood in small groups, whispering until Barnes's entrance scattered them into silence. Cook, a stout woman with red arms and an offended expression, pointed to the scullery. I don't keep poison in my kitchen, she declared before anyone accused her. No one has said you do, Barnes replied. You were thinking it. I'm always thinking something. The bottle lay upon a folded cloth on the scullery table. It was small, blue glass, with a narrow neck and a cork stopper. There was no label. Poirot bent over it. Do not touch, said Barnes automatically. Poirot looked pained. Inspector, I am not a child reaching for jam. Barnes had the bottle wrapped. Even from where I stood, I caught the faint, bitter scent. Cyanide, or so I thought. James the footman stood near the doorway, trembling so violently that his cuffs shook. Did you find it? Barnes barked. No, sir, I never saw it before. Cook folded her arms. He's been like that all evening, poor boy. You'll frighten him into confessing to the gunpowder plot if you shout hard enough. Poirot turned to James. Earlier you said the spoon fell as you came around Mr. Finch's chair. Yes, sir. And now think carefully. Did anyone touch you? James swallowed. I don't know. Think. His eyes closed. There was a movement behind me. I thought someone had shifted their chair. Then my elbow was knocked. Not hard. Just enough. The spoon slipped. From which side? My left, sir. Poirot's eyes narrowed. To your left sat whom? James pictured it. Mr. Charles, sir, nearest the head, then Sir Reginald. No. You were serving from behind Mr. Finch on the opposite side. Oh. Then Miss Blake was to my left, sir. Mr. Finch to my right. But someone could have been behind me by the sideboard. Who? I didn't see. Barnes cursed under his breath. Poirot's gaze had moved to the servants' passage. Ellis, who had access to the kitchen between dinner being served and the death. Kitchen staff, sir. Footman, myself briefly. No guests, to my knowledge. To your knowledge? Yes, sir. Cook snorted. If any guest had come nosing about my pastry, I'd have known. Poirot smiled faintly. I do not doubt it, madame. As Barnes continued questioning the servants, Poirot walked slowly along the passage that connected the kitchen to the dining room. I followed. Halfway along there was a small recess where trays could be set down. Above it hung a row of servant bells. Beneath it stood a narrow cupboard. Poirot opened it. Inside were cleaning cloths, candle ends, and a pair of old galoshes. Nothing more. Yet Poirot remained looking at the cupboard for so long that I finally asked, What is it? Absence. Of what? That, Hastings, is what one must determine. He closed the cupboard and looked back towards the kitchen. Someone placed the bottle where it would be found. Someone placed the glove where it would be found. Someone perhaps placed the smudge where it would be seen. Our murderer is generous with clues. Too generous? Far too generous. We returned to the hall as the clock struck 11. Only 1 hour remained until midnight. The sound rolled through the house, deep and solemn. 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time the 11th stroke faded, the storm had dropped suddenly, leaving behind a silence more oppressive than the noise. It was then that Miss Blake appeared at the drawing-room door. "Monsieur Poirot!" Barnes turned sharply. "Why are you out again?" She ignored him. Her face had changed. The clever composure was gone. "I need to speak to you." "Now?" "Yes, before anyone else does." Poirot crossed to her. "What is it, mademoiselle?" She held out a folded sheet of paper. "I found this in my notebook. It was not there earlier." Poirot took it. Paper was plain, the writing was disguised, but hurried. "The ledger is not the proof. Ask who changed the seats. Ask why Lady Clara died." Midnight. For once, even Poirot did not speak immediately. Lady Clara. The sad portrait in the hall. The dead wife. The old grief no one wished to name. From the drawing-room behind Miss Blake came a sudden strangled cry. Lady Dorothy had fainted. Poirot folded the note slowly. "Ah," he said. "At last. We do not investigate only tonight's murder." He looked towards the portrait in the hall, where Lady Clara Harrow's painted eyes seemed to gaze past us into some older darkness. We investigate the first one. Chapter 6. Lady Clara's Shadow. There are houses in which the dead are more present than the living. Harrow Hall had become such a house. Sir Reginald lay dead in the dining-room. His guests sat under watch in the drawing-room. The servants whispered below stairs. The police moved through corridors and passages with heavy official tread. Yet over all of us, stronger even than the memory of the murdered man, there seemed to hover the pale, silent figure of Lady Clara Harrow. We had seen her first in the little portrait in the hall, a young woman in white, beautiful and desperately sad. Now her name had appeared in a note placed inside Miss Blake's notebook. Ask why Lady Clara died. It was a sentence to chill the blood. Lady Dorothy Sinclair had fainted almost as soon as it was read. She had been carried into the morning-room, where a maid loosened her collar, and Dr. Mead, still present in the house, administered restoratives with the air of a man who disapproved of murder for disturbing his supper and fainting fits for disturbing his murder. When she opened her eyes, she saw Poirot standing near the mantelpiece. For a moment she looked quite old. "I knew it would come back," she whispered. Poirot dismissed the maid with a glance. Barnes remained by the door. I stood beside the window, where the rain had softened to a faint dripping from the gutters. "What would come back, madame?" asked Poirot. Lady Dorothy did not answer at once. She stared at the yellow silk wall, as if seeing beyond it into another year. "Clara," she said at last. "Poor Clara." "Lady Harrow died how long ago?" 17 years. "And the cause?" "Influenza, they said, then weakness of the heart. It was a fashionable death, Monsieur Poirot. Respectable. Convenient. No one asks too many questions when a delicate woman dies in her bed." Barnes straightened. "You suspected foul play?" "I suspected cruelty. That is not always a matter for the police." Poirot's voice was gentle, but perhaps it should have been. Lady Dorothy's eyes filled, though no tears fell. "Clara married Sir Reginald when she was 19. He was already wealthy, already forceful, already accustomed to getting what he wanted. She was gentle, musical, unworldly. At first we all thought she had done brilliantly. That is what people say when a girl marries money. They call it brilliant even when it is only a prettier form of imprisonment. And after? After, she disappeared by inches, first from parties, then from friends, then from herself. Her letters became shorter, then they stopped. When I came here, Sir Reginald was always present, always watching, always speaking for her." "Was there violence?" Lady Dorothy shut her eyes. "I never saw bruises. I saw fear." There was a silence. Even Barnes had the sense not to interrupt it. Poirot said, "The note asks why Lady Clara died. You believe Sir Reginald was responsible?" "I believed he broke her spirit. Whether he did more, I never knew." "But tonight you expected a telephone call from your solicitor regarding Lady Clara's estate." "Yes." "What had changed after 17 years? Lady Dorothy opened the reticule in her lap with trembling fingers and withdrew a folded paper. "I received this 3 weeks ago." Poirot took it. The paper was old, yellowed, and creased. The handwriting was faint but elegant. He read it once, then again, and his face became very still. "May I asked. He handed it to me, and it began without address. "If anything should happen to me, Dorothy, do not let him keep what was meant for Charles. He has made me sign papers I scarcely understood. He says I am foolish, hysterical, unfit. Perhaps I am, but I know this. My money was not his to take, and my child must not be left in his power. There is another paper hidden where he will not think to look. Clara." The last word was smudged, as if by water. "Good Lord," I said. Barnes took the letter from me. "Where did this come from?" "It was sent to me anonymously," said Lady Dorothy. "No envelope, no explanation, only Clara's hand." "And the hidden paper?" asked Poirot. "I hoped my solicitor might find some trace of it. He has been examining old family records, bank papers, anything that remained outside Sir Reginald's control. Tonight he was to telephone if he discovered something." "Did he?" Lady Dorothy's mouth tightened. "No, not yet." Poirot stood very still, his eyes half closed. I knew the look. He was arranging facts upon that invisible board of his. At last he said, "Sir Reginald knew of your inquiry." "Yes." "And tonight he moved you from the seat beside him, placing Charles there instead." She shivered. "I cannot bear to think of it." "Think nevertheless, madame. Did Sir Reginald intend to expose you, or to protect you?" She stared at him. "Protect me, Sir Reginald? It is a question only. He protected no one." Poirot bowed slightly. "Then we shall not yet answer it." We left Lady Dorothy under Dr. Mead's care. In the hall, Barnes stopped Poirot. "If there was an old crime, it gives motive to Lady Dorothy. Revenge for Clara, money for Charles. Perhaps she poisoned Harrow and now faints conveniently when Clara's name appears." Poirot nodded. "It is possible." "You don't sound convinced." "I am not paid to sound convinced, Inspector. I am paid, sometimes not even paid, to be right." Barnes grunted. "Very noble." "Not noble, practical." The inspector went to send a constable to telephone Lady Dorothy's solicitor. Poirot, however, crossed the hall and stood before Lady Clara's portrait. The painted face looked down upon him, pale hair, dressed simply, eyes lowered, one hand resting upon the arm of a chair. It was not a large portrait, nor an obviously valuable one, but there was something in it that held the attention. Poirot looked at it for a long time. "What is it?" I asked. "Hastings, describe to me what you see." "A young woman in a white dress." "Yes." "Sad. Pretty. Rather thin." "Continue." "She is sitting in a chair. There is a curtain behind her. Her hand is on the arm of the chair. The other hand is holding— No, wait." I leaned closer. In the shadow near her lap, almost lost beneath the painter's dark varnish, was a small object. "A book?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Not a book." "A music case?" "No," he pointed. "It is a jewel casket." I stared. "How the devil do you make that out?" "By being less interested in the pretty face than the ugly corner." He turned sharply to Ellis, who had appeared from the passage like a melancholy ghost. "Ellis, where was this portrait usually kept?" The butler hesitated. "Here, sir." "Always?" "No, sir. Before Lady Harrow's death it hung in her sitting-room. Sir Reginald had it moved to the hall after the room was closed. Closed? Yes, sir. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Lady Clara's sitting room still exists? Of course, sir. It has not been used for many years. Show us. Ellis looked uncomfortable. I do not know that Sir Reginald would have wished. Sir Reginald, said Barnes, returning at that moment, is no longer giving orders. The butler bowed. Very good, Inspector. We followed him up the staircase, along a corridor where the air seemed colder, and stopped before a door near the end. Ellis produced a key from his ring. The lock turned stiffly. The room beyond had the strange airless quality of a place preserved after grief, but not out of love. Dust lay on the writing table. A pale rug had faded where sun had once touched it. A piano stood closed beneath a holland cover. On the mantel were two small porcelain birds and an empty space where something had once stood. The curtains were drawn, and when Ellis opened them, the grey light of the stormy night showed wallpaper patterned with tiny blue flowers. Lady Clara had lived here, I thought, or perhaps she had merely endured here. Poirot moved through the room without touching anything at first. Then he crossed to the mantel. What stood here? Ellis looked. I could not say, sir. You were in service, then? As under footman, sir. Think. Ellis frowned. There was a small casket, perhaps. Inlaid wood. Lady Harrow kept letters in it. A jewel casket? I asked. No, sir, a writing box, or so I believed. Poirot turned. And after her death? Sir Reginald removed certain items. Where? I do not know. Poirot walked to the piano. He lifted the cover and opened it. The keys, yellowed with age, gave a faint, discordant sigh beneath his touch. Lady Clara played. Beautifully, sir. On the music stand lay a brittle sheet of Chopin, browned at the edges. Poirot looked at it, then at the portrait in the hall, as if seeing the two together in his mind. He went next to the writing table. One drawer was locked. Key? Asked Barnes. Ellis shook his head. I have none, Inspector. Barnes looked ready to force it, but Poirot held up a hand. Permit. From his pocket, Poirot produced one of those small instruments which, in anyone else, would have appeared burglarious. In his hands it seemed almost moral. A moment later, the drawer opened. Inside were old envelopes, dried sealing wax, a ribbon, and a little bundle of music programs tied with blue thread. No hidden will, no confession, no dramatic paper. Barnes looked disappointed. Nothing. Poirot did not answer. He had taken out the bundle and was examining the bottom of the drawer. The wood there was slightly raised at one corner. Ah! With delicate fingers he lifted a false base. Beneath it lay a small key. Not to the drawer. This key was older, brass and dark with age. Ellis inhaled sharply. You recognize it? Asked Poirot. I think, sir, it may be the key to Lady Harrow's old writing box. Where is the box? Ellis swallowed. In the strong room, perhaps. Sir Reginald kept old papers there. Barnes looked grimly satisfied. Then that's where we go. But before we could leave, there came the sound of hurried steps in the corridor. A constable appeared at the door. Inspector, we've reached Lady Dorothy's solicitor. Well? He says he tried to call Harrow Hall at 9:30, but the line was engaged. He tried again at 10 and got no answer. Lady Dorothy had been watching the clock during dinner, waiting for that call. At 9:30, Sir Reginald had already been dead. Poirot asked, What had the solicitor discovered? The constable glanced at his notebook. He says an old codicil existed, signed by Lady Clara shortly before her death. It placed a large part of her private fortune in trust for Charles Harrow, not under Sir Reginald's control. He says the original vanished years ago. And tonight? He found a record of it in a retired clerk's files. Not enough to prove everything, but enough to reopen the matter. Barnes whistled softly. So Sir Reginald had been sitting on the boy's money. "It would appear," said Poirot. The constable continued. "There's more, sir. The solicitor says he sent a messenger to Harrow Hall this evening with a copy of the record. The messenger delivered it just after 7. We all looked at Ellis. The butler's face had gone rigid. "To whom was it delivered?" asked Poirot. Ellis said nothing. Barnes stepped forward. "To whom?" The butler's lips moved. "To Sir Reginald, Inspector." "You gave it to him?" "No." "Then who?" Ellis closed his eyes briefly, like a man surrendering an old loyalty. "Mr. Charles took it from the hall table." The words seemed to remain in the dusty room long after they were spoken. Charles. Charles, who claimed not to know what announcement his father intended. Charles, who had debts. Charles, who now may have learned that his father had withheld his inheritance. And Charles, who sat beside Sir Reginald when the poisoned spoon reached its mark. Barnes's face hardened. "That puts a new light on the sun." "It puts light," said Poirot. "Whether it illuminates the truth or merely blinds us, we shall see." We went down at once to the strong room, a narrow chamber off Sir Reginald's study with an iron door and shelves of deed boxes. Barnes ordered it opened. Ellis provided the keys. The box was there. It stood on the second shelf, small, inlaid with mother-of-pearl, dusty but intact. Poirot inserted the brass key. It turned. Inside lay a packet of letters, a miniature of Charles as a child, and a folded legal document tied with black ribbon. Barnes lifted it out. "The codicil?" Poirot took it, read quickly, and nodded. "Yes, the missing original. Hidden all these years." "Not hidden from Sir Reginald," said Poirot, "kept by him." I frowned. "But why keep it? Why not destroy it?" Poirot looked at the black ribbon. "Because, Hastings, men like Sir Reginald do not destroy power. They store it." Beneath the codicil lay one final item, a small envelope addressed in Lady Clara's faded hand. "For Charles when he is free of his father." No one spoke. Poirot held the envelope gently, almost reverently. Then behind us the study door creaked. We turned. Charles Harrow stood in the doorway, his face ashen. "You had no right," he said. Barnes moved towards him. "Charles Harrow, I think you'd better explain why you never mentioned taking that solicitor's paper tonight." Charles' eyes were not on Barnes. They were on the envelope in Poirot's hand. "My mother," he said hoarsely. "That is from my mother." "You knew of it?" asked Poirot. "No, I knew only that the old devil had robbed me. I read the solicitor's paper before dinner. I meant to confront him." "Did you?" Charles's face twisted. "Yes. In the hall. Before dinner." Finch's overheard argument, I thought. The dark sleeve. The angry whisper. Sir Reginald's words returned to me. "You shall have nothing more from me. Not a penny, not a favour, not silence." Poirot said softly, "You wore black gloves tonight, monsieur." Charles looked at him. "We all did." "Where are they now?" "In my coat, I suppose." Barnes called for a constable. Charles barked a laugh. "You think I used Marlowe's glove? Poisoned a spoon? Killed him over money? Yes, I hated him. Yes, I wanted what was mine. But he had already lost. Don't you see? With that paper, he had lost." "Unless," said Poirot quietly, "he was going to expose something about you before midnight." Charles stared. "What?" "That is what we must learn." The constable returned with Charles' coat and gloves. Both gloves were present. Clean. Barnes looked annoyed by the fact. Poirot looked merely thoughtful. From the hall came the first deep note of the clock. 11:30. 30 minutes remained until midnight. Poirot turned the envelope over in his hand, then looked at Charles. "I think, monsieur, that we must now read what your mother wished you to know." Charles swallowed. No. Poirot's voice was kind but immovable. Yes. He broke the old seal. Inside was a single sheet. Lady Clara's hand trembled across the page, weaker than in the first letter, but still legible. Poirot read aloud. My darling boy, if this reaches you, then I pray you are beyond his reach. Your father has taken much from me, but not the truth. Trust Dorothy. Trust no bargain your father makes with Mr. Marlowe. And remember this. The man who fears exposure most is not always the man who shouts the loudest. Look to the quiet one. The quiet one. My eyes went at once to Victor Marlowe's name in the ledger, but Poirot did not look towards the drawing-room. He looked at Ellis the butler. The old servant had gone white to the lips. Poirot folded the letter. Ah, he said softly. At last, Lady Clara speaks. Chapter 7. The Quiet One. I have seldom seen a room become dangerous so quickly. Not visibly, you understand. There were no pistols drawn, no overturned chairs, no dramatic rush for the door. The strong room remained as it had been, narrow, airless, lined with deed boxes, and the dead man's carefully preserved secrets. Inspector Barnes stood by the iron door. Charles Harrow stared at his mother's letter as though it had struck him across the face. Poirot held the paper delicately between finger and thumb. But the danger was there. It had entered with Lady Clara's final instruction. Look to the quiet one. In my own mind, the phrase pointed at once to Victor Marlowe. A quieter man I had rarely met. He had the stillness of a snake under a warm stone. Yet Poirot's eyes, instead of turning towards the drawing-room where Marlowe waited, had gone to Ellis the butler. Ellis stood very straight, but his face had lost all its professional composure. Poirot folded the letter. Ellis, he said, you were in service here when Lady Clara died. Yes, sir. As under footman? Yes, sir. You were young then. 23, sir. And loyal? Ellis's mouth tightened. To the household, sir. A careful answer. Not to Sir Reginald. The butler did not reply. Charles turned on him. What does he mean? What has this to do with you? Ellis looked at him then, and something in his expression changed. It was not quite affection. It was too painful for that. But it was not indifference. I was very sorry for your mother, Mr. Charles. Charles stared. You knew her? I served her, sir. That is not the same thing. No, sir. Poirot's voice remained soft. But perhaps, Ellis, you did more than serve. The butler closed his eyes briefly. Careful, Monsieur Poirot, said Barnes. That's an ugly road. Murder is rarely reached by a pretty one, Inspector. Poirot placed Lady Clara's letter upon the table beside the codicil. Let us return to the beginning. 17 years ago, Lady Clara writes to Lady Dorothy that Sir Reginald has forced her to sign papers. She hides a codicil protecting her private fortune for Charles. She writes also to Charles himself, a letter never delivered. In it she warns him, trust Dorothy, trust no bargain with Marlowe, and look to the quiet one. Marlowe, Charles said immediately. Perhaps, said Poirot, but would Lady Clara call Victor Marlowe quiet? He is quiet. He is cold. That is not the same thing. Barnes frowned. You're splitting hairs. I am selecting them, Inspector. It is more precise. Poirot turned back to Ellis. Lady Clara's sitting room was closed after her death. The writing box was taken to the strong room. The codicil was kept, not destroyed. Her letters remained there. Who placed them in the box? Ellis answered mechanically, Sir Reginald, sir. You saw him? No. Then how do you know? Because he ordered the room cleared. To whom? Ellis hesitated. To me. Ah! The little word fell like a pin in a chapel. Charles took a step forward. You cleared my mother's room? Yes, sir. And you never told me? You never told me there were letters?" Alice's composure shook. "You were a child. I was her son." "Yes, sir." There was no defense in his tone, only the weary acceptance of guilt long carried. Poirot said, "You found the letters?" Alice said nothing. "You found the codicil?" Still nothing. "You found proof that Sir Reginald had wronged Lady Clara and intended to wrong the child as well. You kept silent." Ellis lifted his head. "I did what I could." Charles laughed harshly. "What you could? You stood in a doorway and bowed while he robbed me." Colour rose in Ellis's face. "I stood in many doorways, Mr. Charles. I heard many things. I saw Lady Clara weep when no one else cared to see it. I carried notes she was not permitted to send. I turned my back when Lady Dorothy came by the garden gate. I did what a servant could do in a house where the master owned everything, including the truth." Charles looked struck, but his anger did not leave him. "Then why hide the letters?" Ellis's voice dropped. "Because Sir Reginald would have destroyed anyone who used them too soon." "Too soon?" Poirot repeated. The butler's eyes moved to him. "Yes, sir." "Then you were waiting." Ellis's face became blank again, but it was too late. Barnes stepped closer. "Waiting for what?" "For Mr. Charles to be old enough," said Ellis quietly. "For Sir Reginald to weaken. For someone outside the house to care." "And tonight?" asked Poirot. Ellis's hands, gloved in white cotton, closed at his sides. "Tonight the matter came to an end." The words were simple. Their implication was not. Barnes said sharply, "Did you poison Sir Reginald Harrow?" "No." The answer came at once, calm and clear. "Did you arrange for him to be poisoned?" "No." "Did you know he would die?" This time Ellis did not answer so quickly. Poirot watched him with painful attention. "Ellis," he said, "do not lie now. It is too late for elegant service." The butler's shoulders seemed to settle. "I knew something would happen." Charles stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means, sir, that your father intended to expose someone before midnight, but he was not the only person in this house who had made plans." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Whose plans?" Ellis looked towards the door. "Lady Dorothy should not have come tonight." That was all he would say. Barnes sent a constable to keep Ellis under guard in the study while we returned to the drawing-room. Charles insisted on coming with us, clutching his mother's letter in one hand. Poirot permitted it. I think he understood that to deny him would have been cruel. The suspects looked up as we entered. Miss Blake's eyes went immediately to Charles's face. Finch shrank further into his chair. Marlowe did not move. Lady Dorothy had recovered from her faint and sat pale but composed, though I noticed her hand trembled upon the arm of the sofa. Poirot stood before them. "Mesdames, messieurs, we approach midnight. Sir Reginald promised that before that hour his silence would end. It did not. Someone ended it for him." Lady Dorothy whispered, "Have you found who?" "Not yet. But we have found why the dead speak louder in this house than the living." Charles moved suddenly towards her. "Why did you never tell me?" She looked up at him. "Charles, my mother trusted you. She wrote it. She said to trust you." Lady Dorothy went white. "You read the letter?" "Yes." She closed her eyes. "Oh, my poor boy." "Do not call me that, not now. You knew he had stolen from me." "I suspected." "You knew there was a codicil." "I hoped there was." "You let me crawl to him for money that was mine." The words were brutal because they were true. Lady Dorothy rose unsteadily. "I tried, Charles. When you were young, I tried. Sir Reginald threatened to send you away entirely if I interfered. Later, when you were older, you would not hear a word against him unless it suited your anger. You loved him when he was generous and hated him when he was not. I did not know how to reach you." Charles flinched. That, too, had truth in it. Poirot intervened. Madame, tonight you were to sit beside Sir Reginald. Yes? Yet he moved you. Yes. You believed it an insult. I did. Perhaps it was not. Every eye turned to him. Lady Dorothy frowned. What else could it have been? Poirot did not answer her directly. Instead, he addressed the room. Consider. Sir Reginald receives a letter in the morning. It frightens him. Later, a solicitor's record arrives, proving the existence of Lady Clara's codicil. Charles intercepts this paper and confronts him before dinner. Sir Reginald is angry. He tells someone, "You shall have nothing more from me, not a penny, not a favour, not silence." Mr. Finch overhears but cannot see whom he addresses clearly. Then, at dinner, Sir Reginald alters the seating. Why? To keep Charles close, said Miss Blake, or to keep Lady Dorothy away, said Poirot. Lady Dorothy stared. You think the poison was meant for me? No, madam, I think Sir Reginald may have thought so. A silence followed. Barnes said, Explain that. Poirot paced slowly before the fireplace. The poison reached Sir Reginald by the spoon, that much I believe. The smudge on the dish was theatre, the glove was theatre, the bottle in the kitchen dustbin was theatre. The murderer has worked very hard to make us look everywhere except at the simple action which mattered. The spoon, I said. Yes, Hastings, the spoon. But who could know which spoon would reach which person? Only someone close to the service, or someone who could control the service. All eyes moved, as if by instinct, towards the door through which the servants came and went. Ellis? asked Barnes. Poirot shook his head slightly. Ellis knew. Ellis concealed. Ellis perhaps arranged certain revelations. But he is not the hand that poisoned the spoon. Then who? Charles demanded. Poirot turned to Lady Dorothy. Madame, did you receive any note asking you to come to Harrow Hall tonight? She hesitated. Sir Reginald invited me. Only Sir Reginald? Her silence was answer enough. Poirot's voice hardened. Madame. She drew a folded paper from her reticule. I received this yesterday. Poirot took it. The note was written in a neat, anonymous hand. Come to dinner. If you value Clara's memory, sit where you are placed and say nothing until midnight. Barnes swore softly. Why conceal this? Because I thought it came from the person who sent me Clara's letter. Ellis, said Charles. Lady Dorothy looked away. Yes. Poirot examined the note, then passed it to Barnes. No, this is not Ellis's hand. Marlowe spoke for the first time. How convenient that everyone receives anonymous instructions in this house. Poirot turned to him. You did not? No. Interesting. Marlowe smiled faintly. Everything is interesting to you. Not everything, only lies. Miss Blake sat forward. Monsieur Poirot, you said the murderer wanted us looking everywhere except at the simple action. But if the spoon was poisoned, someone had to place it at Sir Reginald's setting after the dropped spoon confused the service. Exactly. Then Charles... No, said Poirot. The certainty of it startled us. Charles himself looked more shocked than relieved. Poirot continued. Charles had motive, proximity, temper, opportunity, perhaps. But he did not know enough. He did not know of the letter to Miss Blake. He did not know of the note to Lady Dorothy. He did not know of Marlowe's missing glove until after. Our murderer did not merely improvise at dinner. He prepared a whole opera of suspicion. Finch gave a weak groan. Then we are dealing with a fiend. With a patient person, said Poirot, that is worse. Barnes glanced at the clock. 10 to midnight. The words struck the room. 10 minutes. Poirot's eyes moved to Miss Blake. Mademoiselle, your anonymous note told you to come to the conservatory at 7:45. Yes. No one came? No? Did you remain until dinner? No. I waited perhaps 5 minutes. Then I returned to the hall. Whom did you see? She frowned. Ellis near the stairs. Finch coming from the gallery. Marlowe by the cloakroom. Marlowe's head turned. I was not by the cloakroom. Miss Blake met his gaze. You were? I was in the study with Sir Reginald. At 7:45? Yes. That is not possible. His voice became cold. Be careful, Miss Blake. Poirot lifted one hand. Let us be precise. Mademoiselle Blake, what did you see? A man's back, dark evening coat, Marlowe's build. Build only? And the way he stood. Poirot looked at her closely. Not his face. No. Monsieur Marlowe, where were you at 7:45? Marlowe's jaw tightened. In the study. With Sir Reginald? Yes. Can anyone confirm this? No. Poirot nodded slowly. And you insist you did not go to the cloakroom? I do. Then someone of your build did. Someone who wished to take your glove. Marlowe's expression changed. For the first time I saw genuine alarm in his eyes. You think I was copied? I think you were useful. Barnes said, to whom? Poirot did not answer. He had turned towards Finch. Monsieur Finch, before dinner you came from the gallery. Yes. I wish to look again at the disputed Caravaggio. Did you see anyone? Finch pushed his spectacles up his nose. Yes, I saw... He stopped. Poirot's voice was very soft. Continue. Finch swallowed. I saw Ellis. At least I thought it was Ellis. Near the cloakroom, but now... Now? The man wore a servant's black coat, but Ellis is taller. I only saw him from behind. Barnes growled, For God's sake, does no one in this house look at faces? In English society, said Poirot, one is often trained not to. The clock ticked loudly. 5 minutes to midnight. Poirot moved to the bell rope beside the fireplace and pulled it. The sound rang somewhere below. A moment later, Thomas, the second footman, appeared. He was older than James, broader, with a square face and careful eyes. His dark hair sat rather low upon his collar, and I noticed Poirot's gaze rest upon the line of it for a moment longer than seemed warranted. Until then he had remained in the background, overshadowed by the trembling James and the dignified Ellis. "Yes, sir?" Poirot smiled pleasantly. "Thomas, at dinner you assisted James with the dessert." "Yes, sir." "You carried some of the dishes." "Yes, sir." "And before dessert, where were you?" "In the pantry, sir." "All the time?" Thomas hesitated. "A moment in the passage, sir, fetching clean spoons." "Ah, clean spoons. From the sideboard drawer?" "No, sir, from the pantry chest." Poirot turned. James had said the extra spoon came from the sideboard drawer. The room felt suddenly very still. Poirot said, "Then when James dropped a spoon, who gave him another?" Thomas looked confused. "I did not, sir." James had been wrong. Or he had been made wrong. Poirot's face had become grave. "Thomas, who stood nearest the sideboard during the dessert service?" Footman looked at the assembled guests, then at the door. "Mr. Ellis, sir." Barnes muttered. "So it is Ellis." "No," said Poirot sharply. "Not Ellis." Thomas blinked. "Sir?" Poirot stepped closer. "When you say Mr. Ellis, you mean a man in the butler's coat?" "Yes, sir." "You saw his face?" "No, sir, he had his back turned." Poirot's eyes shone. "There, always from behind. The quiet figure in the hall, the gloved hand by the sideboard, the man at the cloakroom, the servant near the dining room, never the face." He turned slowly towards the suspects. "Our murderer is not quiet by nature. He has made himself quiet by disguise." The clock began to strike midnight. 1. Poirot looked at Victor Marlowe. "You were useful for your glove." 2. He looked at Charles. "You were useful for your motive." 3. He looked at Lady Dorothy. You were useful for Lady Clara's grief. 4. He looked at Miss Blake. You were useful for the Caravaggio scandal. 5. He looked at Finch. You were useful for panic. 6. Then Poirot turned to the footman Thomas. Thomas had gone grey. 7. Monsieur Thomas, said Poirot, you may remove the false hair from beneath your collar. 8. The footman's hand jerked. 9. Barnes moved fast, but Thomas moved faster. He sprang backwards, knocking over a small table, and bolted for the door. 10. Charles caught at him, but missed. 11. Barnes and I rushed after him into the hall. 12. At the final stroke of midnight, the quiet footman reached the great staircase, turned, and drew from his pocket a small revolver. Lady Dorothy screamed. Poirot did not move. Thomas levelled the weapon at him with a hand that shook not from fear, but rage. No further, he said. But the voice that emerged was no servant's voice. It was educated, cold, and horribly familiar to Miss Blake, who whispered one name into the silence. Daniel. The dead brother. The man believed drowned by the river. The quiet one had not been dead at all. Chapter 8. The Man Who Returned from the River. For several seconds no one moved. The clock had ceased striking, yet its final note seemed still to tremble in the walls. Thomas, if Thomas he truly was, stood halfway up the great staircase with the revolver in his hand. His footman's coat was disordered, his collar torn, and beneath it I saw now what Poirot had seen. The edge of false dark hair, badly loosened during his struggle. Miss Evelyn Blake stood in the drawing-room doorway, white as the lace at her throat. "Daniel," she said again. The man on the stairs flinched as if she had struck him. "Do not call me that." Her hand went to the doorframe. "You are dead." So I was told. Inspector Barnes had halted at the foot of the stairs. Charles Harrow stood behind him, breathing hard. Lady Dorothy had sunk back onto the sofa, her face hidden in her hands. Finch, poor creature, had taken refuge behind a chair. Victor Marlowe had not moved from the fireplace, but his expression had changed entirely. For the first time that evening, Victor Marlowe looked afraid. Poirot remained in the centre of the hall. He was very small beneath the great chandelier, but I do not think any man there commanded more attention. "Put down the revolver, monsieur," he said. The disguised footman laughed. "Monsieur, how civil! I had forgotten how polite murder-houses can be." "Civility is not innocence, it is merely a habit." "Then Harrow had many habits." "And you killed him." The revolver shifted towards Poirot. "Do not make me sorry I missed you from the first." I took a step forward, but Poirot's hand lifted slightly. I stopped. His face remained calm. "You did not intend to kill me, nor Inspector Barnes, nor your sister. You intended only Sir Reginald Harrow." Daniel Blake's mouth twisted. "Only." The word was bitter enough to poison the air. Miss Blake came forward despite Barnes's warning. "Daniel, what happened? We were told you drowned." "I was meant to." Marlowe spoke sharply. "That is absurd." Daniel turned the revolver on him. "Keep quiet." Marlowe obeyed. It was the first wise thing I had seen him do. Poirot said, "Permit me to speak, Monsieur Blake. If I am wrong, you may correct me. If I am right, you will know that more lies are useless." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Go on, then. Perform." Poirot inclined his head. "You worked for the Paris dealer connected to Sir Reginald's Caravaggio. You discovered irregularities, forged provenance, stolen art, concealed ownership, payments made through men such as Marlowe. You copied a ledger. You intended perhaps to expose them." Daniel laughed softly. "I intended to save my own skin. Exposure came later. Marlowe discovered it." Marlowe said, "No." "Be silent," snapped Barnes. Poirot continued. "You were threatened, framed for theft, dismissed. Then came the accident by the river. But it was not an accident. Daniel's eyes had gone distant. No, it was a lesson. 2 men, fog, a blow at the back of the head. I remember water. I remember thinking how ridiculous it was that the Thames should be the last thing I ever tasted. Miss Blake covered her mouth. But you lived, said Poirot. I lived. A lighterman pulled me out 1/2 a mile downriver. I had no papers, no money, and no great desire to present myself to the men who had tried to kill me. So Daniel Blake died. It proved safer. And you became Thomas? Eventually. The real Thomas. In Canada, last I heard. He sold me his references. Servants come and go. No one looks too closely if the silver is polished and the wine arrives on time. Poirot nodded. The perfect disguise. Not because a servant is invisible, but because society trains itself not to see him. Daniel's face hardened. For once, Monsieur Poirot, you say something true. Miss Blake whispered. Why did you not tell me? His eyes moved to her, and for the first time the anger in them faltered. Because you would have tried to save me. I would have. Yes, and you would have died for it. She said nothing. Poirot said gently, You came to Harrow Hall as a footman to recover the ledger. At first. But then you found Lady Clara's letters? Daniel looked sharply at him. Ellis showed them to me. A faint sound came from the study, where Ellis stood under guard. He had come to the doorway, pale and rigid. Poirot turned. Yes. Ellis, who had waited 17 years for justice but had not dared to act. Ellis, who recognized in the new footman a man with knowledge of Sir Reginald's old crimes. Ellis, who sent Lady Dorothy Clara's letter and helped prepare tonight's reckoning. Ellis lowered his head. I never meant murder. No, said Poirot. You meant exposure. You meant to gather them all here. Lady Dorothy, Miss Blake, Charles, Marlowe, Finch, and force Sir Reginald to open the box of secrets before midnight. Daniel gave a harsh smile. Exposure, such a clean word. It makes cowards feel brave. Ellis looked at him in anguish. I trusted you. You trusted a dead man. That was foolish. Barnes said, Then you planted the notes? Daniel shrugged. Some. Ellis sent Lady Dorothy's. I sent Evelyn's. Sir Reginald wrote his own little announcement, pompous to the end. Everyone came for a different truth. None of them knew the whole. And the letter this morning? Asked Poirot. The one that frightened him into calling this gathering? Mine, said Daniel. I wanted him to know that someone who should have been dead was still counting. And the glove? Asked Poirot. Marlowe's, taken from the cloakroom. Why? Daniel's gaze moved to Marlowe. Because he deserved to hang beside Harrow. Marlowe's face tightened. I never ordered your death. No. Men like you never order things. You suggest. You regret. You ask whether a difficulty has been removed. Poirot's eyes remained on Daniel. You used Marlowe's build and glove to create witnesses who thought they saw him from behind. Then you made sure the glove was found with a smear upon it. Yes. The bottle in the kitchen dustbin? Also mine. The smudge on Sir Reginald's dessert dish? A distraction. James saw exactly what I wished him to see. And the spoon? At that, Daniel's expression changed. There was pride in it. Cold, ugly pride. The spoon was simple. People always overlook the simple thing. Poirot's face hardened. Tell it. Daniel glanced down at the revolver, then back at Poirot. I coated the bowl of the spoon with a little cyanide mixture, thickened with chocolate syrup. Not enough to drip, enough to cling. The spoon was kept ready beneath a folded napkin on the sideboard. When James dropped the clean spoon, because I nudged his elbow from behind, I replaced it while pretending to steady the tray. Sir Reginald was watching James, not me. Everyone was watching Sir Reginald's temper. He took the poisoned spoon himself. And the dish? untouched. Barnes muttered, "God help us." Poirot said quietly, "No, Inspector. God had little to do with this. It was man's work." Daniel's eyes flashed. "Harrow killed before I did. Perhaps? Perhaps." His voice rose. "He crushed Lady Clara. He stole from his son. He ruined Dorothy. He helped bury stolen art beneath respectable walls. He let Marlowe's men throw me into the river." Poirot did not look away. "All that may be true. Then why should he live?" "Because the choice was not yours." Daniel laughed. "Whose, then? The courts, the police? Men like Harrow buy delay, respectability, illness, doubt. They die in bed with portraits over the mantel and servants closing the curtains. I gave him the death he earned." "No," said Poirot. "You gave yourself the crime he deserved to be tried for." The words struck him. His hand tightened round the revolver. Miss Blake stepped forward. "Daniel, please, it is over." He looked at her, and in that instant I saw not the avenger, not the disguised servant, not the returned ghost, but a ruined young man who had lived too long with one idea. "No," he said. "It was over when I went into the river." His hand shifted. I thought he meant to fire at Poirot. So did Barnes. We moved at the same time. But the revolver turned not outward, but inward. Miss Blake screamed. Poirot's voice cracked across the hall. "Non!" I sprang forward, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Barnes came from the other side. Charles, with more courage than sense, hurled himself at Daniel's legs. The shot went off. The sound in that enclosed hall was tremendous. Lady Dorothy cried out. Finch disappeared entirely behind his chair. Marlowe ducked like a man to whom bullets were not theoretical. For one awful moment I thought Daniel had killed himself. Then I saw the revolver spinning across the stair carpet, smoking faintly. The bullet had buried itself in the plaster near the portrait of some Harrow ancestor who looked thoroughly offended. Charles had Daniel pinned against the banister, and Barnes seized his wrist. Daniel did not resist. He simply sagged, all the terrible energy gone out of him. Miss Blake ran up the stairs. "Daniel!" Barnes held out a hand. "Miss Blake, no." But Poirot said softly, "Let her." She knelt before her brother. He would not look at her. "I am sorry," he whispered. "For leaving me?" she asked. "For coming back like this?" Barnes took the revolver and passed it to a constable. "Daniel Blake, I arrest you for the murder of Sir Reginald Harrow. You are not obliged to say anything." Daniel laughed once faintly. "I have said too much already." "No," said Poirot. "At last, monsieur, you have said enough." They took him away a little after midnight. Not far at first. The storm had washed mud across the square, and the police carriage was delayed. He was placed in the study under guard. Miss Blake was permitted a few minutes with him. What passed between them I never knew and did not ask. There are griefs that are not improved by witnesses. The rest of the house remained in a state of stunned collapse. Marlowe was detained for further questioning regarding the ledger and the attack on Daniel years before. He protested, of course, but without his earlier elegance. There is nothing like seeing a planted accusation fail to make a guilty man appreciate silence. Finch, once convinced that he was neither murdered nor arrested, became almost cheerful, though he still asked 3 times whether his name would appear in the papers. Lady Dorothy sat with Charles in the morning room. She had Lady Clara's final letter in her lap. Charles did not speak for a long while. Then at last he took her hand. It was not forgiveness, perhaps, but it was a beginning. Ellis confessed to sending Lady Dorothy the first letter and to helping recover Lady Clara's papers from the strong room. He had believed Daniel intended exposure only. I think Poirot believed him. Whether the law would be equally merciful was another matter. By dawn, the storm had spent itself. The police removed Sir Reginald's body as the first grey light came over Mayfair. Harrow Hall, stripped of darkness, looked suddenly less grand. The marble was cold. the gilt frames gaudy. The orchids in the dining room had begun to wilt, their crimson petals fallen upon the white cloth like drops of old blood. Poirot and I stood in the hall before Lady Clara's portrait. Miss Blake came to us there. She looked exhausted but composed. "Monsieur Poirot." "Mademoiselle." "They will hang him?" Poirot did not answer at once. "That will be for the court." "He was murdered before he murdered." "Yes." "But it will not matter?" "It will matter. Whether it will matter enough, I cannot say." Her eyes moved to the portrait. "I spent years chasing the truth. I thought truth would feel cleaner." "It rarely does," said Poirot. "Truth is not soap, mademoiselle. It does not wash away what has happened. It merely shows us where the stain lies." She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you for finding him." Poirot bowed. "I regret only that I did not find him sooner." She left us then, walking slowly down the steps into the damp morning. Inspector Barnes came from the study with the ledger under his arm. "This will make noise." "Yes," said Poirot. "Marlowe may go down with it." "Perhaps." "Sir Reginald, too, if the dead could be prosecuted." "The dead receive another court, Inspector." Barnes grunted. "You always get philosophical after breakfast." "We have not had breakfast." "That explains the gloom." Poirot smiled faintly. Barnes hesitated, then said, "You knew it was Thomas when—" "Not knew, suspected." "Oh, naturally." The clues were too theatrical, the glove, the bottle, the smudge. They pointed outward, to Marlowe, to Charles, to Lady Dorothy. But the act itself required inward knowledge, the service, the spoons, the movements of the footman. James was frightened but foolish. Ellis was loyal but burdened. Thomas was too calm. "He barely spoke." "Exactly. In a house where everyone had something to say, he had made himself a silence." Barnes looked towards the stairs. "The quiet one?" "Yes." "And Lady Clara meant Ellis?" "I think Lady Clara meant whoever listened when others spoke. In her life, perhaps Ellis. Tonight the phrase found a darker echo." The inspector shook his head. "Well, Poirot, I shall never attend a dinner party again." "My friend, you are safe. You would never be invited to one like this." Barnes barked a laugh and went out. Poirot and I remained a moment longer. "You are troubled," I said. He looked up at Lady Clara's portrait. "Yes, Hastings. But justice was done." "Was it?" I was taken aback. "The murderer was caught. That is law. It is necessary. It is not always the whole of justice." He turned away from the portrait. "Sir Reginald made this house a museum of possession. Paintings, money, people, silence. He collected them all. In the end, one of the things he had buried came back through the servant's door with poison in his hand. A grim moral." "Most true morals are grim. That is why people prefer pretty lies." We stepped out into the morning. The rain had left the square washed and shining. The air smelled of wet stone and horse harness. Somewhere, absurdly, a milk cart rattled past, and London continued as though nothing remarkable had occurred. Poirot paused at the gate and looked back once at Harrow Hall. "The dinner is over, Hastings," he said. "And the bill?" Poirot's face was grave. "Ah, mon ami, the bill had been waiting 17 years. Then he turned up his collar against the damp, adjusted his immaculate cuffs, and walked beside me into the pale London dawn. Thank you for staying with us to the very last line of the dinner party murder. What lingers, when the guests have gone and the rain has washed the square clean, is not the cleverness of the poison, nor the neatness of the trap, but Poirot's quiet verdict on the house itself. Sir Reginald Harrow made his home a museum of possession. Paintings, money, people, silence. He collected them all, and he buried what he could not display. And in the end, One of the things he had buried came back through the servant's door with poison in its hand and 17 years of patience behind it. The murderer was caught. That, as Poirot reminds us, is the law. It is necessary. It is not always the whole of justice. That is the cruelty and the beauty of a case like this one. The bill, as the little Belgian says, had been waiting a very long time, and someone was always going to be made to pay it. If this two-part mystery kept you guessing, if you suspected the right person or the wrong one, or changed your mind 3 times before the conservatory, tell us in the comments at what moment the truth began to show through. And tell us which of our detectives you'd like to spend a long evening with next. Nocturnal Tales brings you original full-length mysteries every week, alongside the classic cases of the Midnight Archive. If you'd like to help keep them coming, the links for Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and PayPal are in the description. For now, thank you again for listening to the end. Until the next case, keep your doors locked, your secrets lighter than this house kept its own, and remember, some debts are paid not in money, but in the dark.